What's up guys, this is your favorite fanfic YouTuber, the Fanfic Majesty, and welcome to another amazing video. You can follow me on Patreon for exclusive stories. My Zanpakuto can stop time. First chapter 1 Kendo promise. Advertisement, it's really troublesome. Kyōraku Shimo looked at the entrance test in front of him with a majestic appearance. Sure enough, compared to high-risk occupations like shinigami, the extravagant life of aristocrats is more suitable for me. If it were not for the request of an unscrupulous elder in the family, he would never come here. Even with some hidden strengths, Kyōraku Shimo successfully entered the Mao Spiritual Academy with the qualifications of an outstanding student. With his excellent test results, he was put into the best class before the school officially started. Is it tomorrow for the Hisana ceremony? Kyōraku Shimo looked at Mr. Shinigami in charge of the dormitory with some doubts. Yes, after all the freshmen are arranged, the ceremony will be held the next day. When facing this student dressed in high-class noble costumes, even if it is a formal shinigami, his words are extremely respectful. Soul Society is a highly hierarchical place. No matter where it is, it can reflect this. The Mao Spiritual Academy adopts a dormitory system, and each student has his own dormitory, and there is not much difference. Single rooms are not bad. Kyōraku Shimo looked at the surroundings and nodded in satisfaction. All the necessary facilities are available, and if you have any needs, you can contact Shinigami, who is in charge of this place. Ding! It is detected that host has officially arrived at the Mao Spiritual Academy, and became a student among them, and successfully clocked in. Close black lens bracket. Reward is being issued. The familiar voice in his mind made Shimo's always calm mind a bit agitated for a while. Congratulations to host for acquiring Kendo promise. A lot of knowledge about the promise road flooded into Shimo's mind, causing his delicate brows to be slightly frowned. Sword and will. The situation precedes brute force. The way of promise continues in the heart. Shimo tried to pick up the practice knives in the dormitory and waved it. The refined knives that were slightly heavy in the past are unexpectedly agile at this time. Like another extension of the body, it moves with the heart, light and sharp. Wuji Kendo is clumsy and clumsy, Shimo exclaimed. From the performance just now, he has found his progress in Kendo. Advertisement. After coming to the world of Shinigami, his Kendo talent has always been relatively average. But as a Shinigami, slashing the fist and going ghost is extremely important. Kyōraku Shimo had a headache for this for a long time until his chi came. Although he was forcibly sent to the Mao Spiritual Academy under the coercion of an unscrupulous elder. However, in a sense, he himself is also very longing for this place. Because judging from the memory in my mind, I seem to be a student in the same class as a girl with long tails and short hair. Unfortunately, because of his identity and talent, he was not able to be in the same class with him. Forget it, don't want too much. Shimo shook his head and said to himself indifferently. I have to stay in the Mao Spiritual Academy for a while, everything is possible. Tomorrow is the day when Hisana opens, I hope everything goes well. The moment the voice fell, the voice of the system sounded at the right time. The new check-in task has been released. Please check in at Hisana and successfully obtain the sealed state. Close black lens bracket. Task reward. Zanpakuto, the only character, Shimo sighed and said helplessly. It's a pity, that kind of leisurely life of prettier fish is gone forever. The next day, the entrance ceremony officially began. Unexpectedly, in a tirade, Shimo had heard similar words more than once in Kyōraku's house. And in my previous life, as a glorious hitman, I have heard it countless times. In his words, it is that the ears are all worn out. What effort, future, tradition, glory throughout this article, it's just an expression of a theme, and you have to be obedient. Only by obedient can you have everything you want. After the dean and leadership of the Ziyang Academy of Spiritualism finished their speeches, it was the sorting ceremony. However, Shimo had already scheduled a scheduled flight. Things like this are not rare no matter which world they're in. After all, it is a superior nobleman. Shimo is also very happy to accept the convenience of this identity. Traversing is also a technical activity. Advertisement. However, he saw a familiar figure in the crowd. The petite figure was wrapped in a wide student's uniform, his short black hair was slightly turned up, and a single bunch of bangs fell in front of the delicate face, and his eyes were somewhat introverted and firm. Kuchiki Shikia. Unlike his class, Rukia Kuchiki was not put into a class because of his talent in Kendo. Since then, a group of students have been separated temporarily, led by the teachers of their respective classes, preparing to enter the narrow space. Shimo belongs to the first batch of students, and at the same time he saw a red-haired young man who was very stinky. Abarai Renji. Shimo didn't want to say hello to him. In a sense, this kid is his competitor. Of course, Shimo will not give him any chance. Under the sign of the teacher in charge, the guardian of Hisana chanted the mantra that opened Hisana, and his spiritual power surged in an uneasy manner in front. The dazzling curse seal was carved on the barrier, shaking the surrounding space. Open. With a loud shout, the barrier touched. Hisana also appeared in front of everyone. What caught your eye was a pure white blade that pierced into the ground, and a sharp sense rushed towards you. Ding! Punch in. Please host successfully obtained the sealed state to complete the task. Close black lens bracket. The system's prompt sound also sounds at the right time. Everyone, please seize the time to enter the narrow space. Follow the choices deep in your heart and find your own sealed state. The teacher's voice resounded in the venue. Shimo didn't hesitate and walked straight into it. Whatever you choose, it doesn't exist. The sealed state looks the same. The power of Zanpakuto is determined by Shinigami's soul. Because when Ermiya Wangyue forged it, he gave it unlimited potential. The cold handle of the knife was held in his hand. The fusion from above the soul is completed in an instant. Check-in is completed, task rewards are being issued. Congratulations to host for getting the only time Zanpakuto. Chapter 2 Time Series Zanpakuto, New Book for Flowers, Evaluation, Votes for Support. Advertisement. At the moment of holding the sealed state, the feeling of pulling from the body makes his consciousness a little fuzzy in an instant. When his consciousness was awakened, Shimo had already arrived in another dimension. And the scene before him only brought him 2 words. Weird. Shrouded in all directions, not the real scenery, but all kinds of distorted clocks. The ticking sound echoed in my ears, the second hand turns, the hourglass flows, the gears twist. The countless clocks and watches are running steadily in this different space. Shimo has not had time to observe here carefully in the future, and his consciousness is blurred again. The next moment, he returned to the narrow space again. Everything in front of him seemed to freeze at the moment before he lost consciousness. Shimo's expression was abnormal, and no one else noticed it. However, when the sealed state was selected, some teachers had already noticed it. The teacher who took the class came to him, a little surprised. Shimo, have you selected your sealed state? After hearing this, Shimo smiled and said, "It's done." At the same time, he raised the sealed state in his hand to signal. Of course, there is no essential difference in the sealed state of Shinigami. The upright difference comes from Shinigami itself. Although the teacher in charge of the class was curious, he did not ask too much about it. As a teacher of the Mao Spiritual Academy, I still know some secrets. My student, as a member of the Kyōraku family, should have been instructed by his elders before obtaining the sealed state. However, what he didn't know was that the elder who sent Shimo was a one-handed stalking operation, letting Shimo develop himself. Advertisement, I'll send you out. The teacher in charge said in a deep voice, the students who have obtained the sealed state cannot continue to stay in the cramped room. Shimo nodded, followed behind him and prepared to leave Haza. The way of leaving was also achieved through Kido. As the place where the sealed state is stored, the narrow room is of great significance to the entire Yuling Ting. If you want to leave here, you can only choose a one-way portal. Ask Ziyang Academy of Arts and Crafts, the familiar system voice sounded again. The new check-in task has been released. Please check in at the Mao Spiritual Academy for 2 years and graduate as an outstanding student. Task reward. Zanpakuto Shikai's first ability, close black lens bracket. The new check-in task made Shimo a little confused. Shikai's first ability? Does my Zanpakuto still have many abilities? Shimo had guessed that the strange space he entered in the narrow space might be the Zanpakuto space. But after solving this question, a new problem appeared again. Then where is my Zanpakuto? Shimo recalled the scene at that time. Except for various kinds of clocks, there was no existence resembling creatures. He stood at the entrance to the narrow space, and he pondered for a long time, until his head was a little swollen, and he didn't stop. Forget it, there must be a way to the mountain. Shimo temporarily gave up the idea of searching for Zanpakuto. Next, consider how to successfully graduate within 2 years. Just as he was immersed in the vision of the future, he suddenly met with a gentle gaze. When he saw the owner of his gaze, Shimo suddenly took a breath. Hao Xuan didn't control his mentality. The short brown hair was scattered randomly, and under the black-rimmed glasses, there were harmless, gentle gazes from humans and animals. The corners of his mouth were slightly raised, as if he had seen something interesting. Aizen Moyasuke, the captain of the active 5th Division, the ruler of Hueco Mundo, the biggest careerist and conspirator, the man who changed the 3 worlds by himself. Advertisement. How could he appear here? An inspiration flashed in Shimo's mind, thinking of another identity of Aizen Kuyusuke. Yes, the special calligraphy teacher of the Spiritual Arts Academy. But, why does he keep looking at me with such weird eyes? If you change to another person, you may have the same kind smile at Aizen. However, Shimo, who knew its essence, looked a little stiff in his smile. Fortunately, some teachers who were waiting here came over in time. When I thought that there were students so quickly, I chose the sealed state. The teacher was obviously a little surprised. Usually, those students will not come out until the last moment. In response, Shimo could only respond with a stiffer smile. Although he turned around, he could notice that Aizen's eyes remained on his body. Although it is not clear what happened, but Shimo can be sure that he seems to have been targeted by Aizen. It's not good to go out, Shimo secretly said in his heart. It seems that you have to be more cautious in the future. The teacher didn't seem to notice Shimo's expression, but continued. Come with me, there is a scabbard prepared here. There is no difference in the outer double shape of the sealed state, so the scabbards are also standard. This, even if Shimo is a nobleman, can't avoid it. After choosing the scabbard, Shimo left in a hurry. Aizen Huyusuke, who was standing on the high platform with many teachers, watched his leaving back, his eyes a little deep. Weird feeling. A child of the Kyōraku family. It looks like I need to pay more attention. Chapter 3 New check-in task. New book for flowers for evaluation, votes for support. Advertisement. The feeling of being watched by Aizen is not very pleasant. Shimo responded with absolute caution to this conspirator. He is not a high IQ crowd with exhaustive strategies. If only relying on IQ to play with people like Aizen, Shimo is confident that he won't be left behind. Right now, all he can rely on is his own cheat. This idea just came up, and the system's prompt sound unexpectedly came again. The new check-in task has been released. Please check in the Kendo classroom and get the first place among freshmen in Kendo. Close black lens bracket. Task reward. God dreams of a sword flow. 222. Shimo was full of question marks when he saw the task reward. What stuff? Is the reward span of this task a bit outrageous? The last time it was promised swordsmanship, this time it became a sword of God's dream. What will it be next time? Shi Yu Kangji and Lu. Haifeng Ji and Dao. Obviously, Shimo is already a little bit confused about his own cheat routine. However, rewards are always good. Since he is pursuing the ultimate in Kendo, he might as well accommodate hundreds of rivers and converge into the sea. If I remember correctly, the first class should be Kendo. Shimo kneaded his chin with his index finger and thumb, thinking. Then you might as well take this opportunity and directly complete this task first. Because he was the first student to wash the sealed state, he was the only one in the Kendo class at this time. Shimo didn't care about other things, and started his Kendo practice directly on the training ground. The way of no throwing continues in my heart. Sword promise. There is no fixed move, more is contained in its own sword intent. Shimo held Akuma in the sealed state in both hands, his eyes had already changed. The sword intent circulated in those dark eyes, like a sharp sword, about to pierce the opponent's chest. Different from the masterful piece of Yi, Shimo's understanding of promised sword is more like a sword with open front. Advertisement in the circulation of the moves, the sword intent is raging, and the sound of breaking through the air is endless. Stepping forward, twisting his waist, the sealed state in Shimo's hand is cut out at an incredible angle. The front end of the sealed state has a vague sword pressure, as if to cut everything in front of you. After Shimo warmed up, he took the sealed state back into the knife again. Shimo, who was still quite satisfied with his current strength, frowned deeply at this time. Although he is lazy on weekdays, Shimo's talent is not bad. Has the teachings of bad elders, the foundation is still very solid. But this basic strength is not even comparable to cannon fodder in Lingting. I hope the next task can give a better reward. Shimo looked forward to the blue sky. There was a slight worry in the sunlight, and muttered to himself. As time passed, the students who went to obtain the sealed state also walked in one by one. Everyone's face is filled with a satisfied smile, and it is clear that they have obtained their favorite sealed state. Shimo's gaze didn't stay on everyone for too long. He was attracted by a red-haired young man who looked very stinky. As the existence of Inazuri, Rukongai's 78th district, Aburai Renji's character is even more violent. In the strange environment of Ziyang Spiritual Academy, he seemed to choose this character to protect himself. Most of the people were in groups, but he was the only one who seemed very isolated. Soon, Aburai Renji was looking at the time. He was stunned for a moment, and then he met him with his fierce gaze. Shimo smiled, not paying attention. He knows Aburai Renji's character, so he doesn't care about it. Aburai Renji was a little confused, and whispered in a low voice. Weirdo. After all the students in the first class arrived at the training ground of the Kendo class, the Kendo teacher also appeared in front of them soon. My name Miyano Kaide is your Kendo teacher. Miyano Ban is a plain-looking middle-aged man, with no strange temperament visible on his body, and he is very easygoing. In order to better improve your Kendo level, I decided to conduct a simple Kendo test on you first. Different levels of Kendo will have different Kendo teachings. So, I hope you can put out your full strength to be tested. Advertisement. Shimo stood in the crowd, a strange color appeared on his face. Kendo test. Miyano Kaide did not pay attention to the whispers from the students, but continued to say in a calm tone. A pair of two will compete in Kendo with wooden swords, and the winner will enter the next round of competition. Is there anything you don't understand? Everyone looked left and right, looking at the students around them, as if they were looking for an opponent to talk to. But Miyano Kaide seemed to have assigned opponents for them. Soon, the large training ground was full of students. Miyano Kaide stood on a high place, his eyes swept across the training ground like an eagle set, and a dull voice sounded. Let's start now. Shimo held a wooden sword and looked at the opponent in front of him. His face was somber, he seemed to be a young boy, with the symbol of aristocracy on his clothes. As for which family it belongs to, Shimo can't remember for a while. He didn't talk nonsense. After nodding his head, he went directly into the fighting state. With the sword in one hand, step forward to the left, and the sword in the hand pierces the opponent's throat. The sharp sound of breaking through the air resounded on its wooden sword. In the face of such an attack, the opponent seemed to be in a hurry and couldn't deal with it calmly. After comprehending Promise Kendo, Shimo's Kendo level is already quite good. His arms stretched out, and the tip of his sword was pointed at the opponent's throat. One move was to solve the battle. I surrender. Regarding the gap between himself and Shimo, although the noble boy was unwilling to do so, he had to accept the reality. Kendo tests are carried out round by round. Shimo didn't encounter any strong opponents, and the strongest could only be solved with 3 moves. This situation has been maintained until the last round. Shimo looked at his new opponent with a dangerous smile on his face. Kyōraku Shimo. Aburai Renji. Chapter 4. The First Freshman in Kendo. Advertisement. Miyano Kaide patrolled between the two. He saw all the students fighting before. Kyōraku Shimo and Aburai Renji are undoubtedly the 2 most penultimate talents in Kendo among the students in this class. However, it remains to be seen by Shang Zui who can get the top spot in the new Kendo. The Kendo level of their previous opponents was too inferior. It is not possible to fully display the strength of these 2 people. Now, the strong fight. Let me take a good look at who is the real freshman first. Shimo didn't know the idea of the official newspaper. It's the opponent in front of you, but it's worthy of him getting serious. Unlike his previous opponent, Aburai Renji's beast-like gaze is full of desire for battle. On the hands holding the wooden sword, the green veins were exposed, making a creaking sound. Obviously, he sensed a dangerous aura on Shimo's body. Shimo faced Aburai Renji in the same posture. The wooden sword sank slightly, and the tip of the sword faced it diagonally. Unlike the other's aggressive gaze, Shimo's gaze was more calm. Kendo competition will not be mixed in Reiatsu. The 2 just maintained this state, but it made the surrounding aura more solidified. Yes, the test is a person's patience and determination. Obviously, these 2 points are not what Aburai Renji is good at. I'm sure to win this competition. Aburai Renji yelled and slashed with his wooden sword in full force. It's hard to tell. Shimo raised the wooden sword with his backhand and resisted the opponent's attack. The momentum is heavy. The feeling that Aburai Renji gave Shimo was not like an ordinary wandering soul, but a ferocious beast. During the battle, the potential and power he exploded out of it was not comparable to that of ordinary students. It is a pity that the opponent has not received professional Kendo practice. Shimo's eyes changed, and suddenly became very sharp. Advertisement. He twisted his wrist and slashed towards Aburai Renji at an incredible angle. The sudden counterattack caused Aburai Renji to be in a hurry. Fortunately, the reaction speed is extremely fast, and the timely post-sale reluctantly stabilizes the situation. But when Wrong reacted again, the atmosphere on the training ground had already changed. How can it be? Is this the talent of the superior nobles? Unexpectedly, when he first entered school, it was the master who got the sword intent. Too frightening among the onlookers. There is no shortage of knowledgeable people. Relatively speaking, there were more nobles in the first group than Rukongai civilians. Realizing the change in Shimo's aura, Asan and Renji clenched their teeth, and the unconvinced gaze came out of his eyes again. How about Gianni? He roared and attacked Shimo. I won't admit defeat. With a gentle smile on Shimo's face, he twisted the wooden sword in his hand, stepped forward, and stabbed straight out. The sharp sword intent wrapped around the wooden sword. Without using Reiatsu, a powerful sword pressure appeared on the wooden sword. Snapped. The 2 wooden swords collided with each other, making a crisp sound. The wooden sword in Shimo's hand stopped slightly, and the wooden sword in Aburai Renji's hand was cut off instantly. The solid sword lingered on the wooden sword, and went straight to the heart of Aburai Renji. Cold sweat slipped from Aburai Renji's cheeks. He felt that what was lying across his throat was not a wooden sword, but an ultimate killer. It seems that the outcome is quite clear. Miyano Kaide made a word to terminate the competition. Shimo retracted the wooden sword and nodded slightly. At this time, Aburai Renji broke free from the sword intent. He only felt that the student uniform on his body was soaked in sweat. Thank you. Advertisement. Aburai Renji's voice is extremely small, but his attitude is very sincere. Obviously, in the test just now, he has realized the gap between himself and Shimo. If the opponent hadn't kept his hand, he would have been injured at this time. Knowing the gap, he didn't feel decadent, but because of this battle, Aburai Renji's eagerness to win even more aroused. After a moment of loss, he raised his head and looked at Chiba very seriously. I will defeat you. Shimo laughed and persuaded. You'd better change your goal. The person I defeated, even if I give you time to catch up, will gradually become invisible. Naturally, Aburai Renji would not be reconciled, and his eyes were extremely firm. He silently picked up the broken wooden sword and returned to the students. Kendo is very good. Miyano Kaide prefers outstanding students if he wants to come. You are one of the few students I have met who can understand the existence of sword intent right after entering school. I heard Miyano's pro-confession. There was another noise among the students. It's really a sword intent. Is this the difference of talent? This guy will not belong to the Kuchiki family. Idiot, haven't you heard the self-introduction? Kyōraku Shimo, a superior nobleman. It is said that the captain of the 8th division is also a member of the Kyōraku family. Is it true that the season is the most important thing for the captain of the division? Sword intent, for shinigami, is undoubtedly very important. Amid the compliments of everyone, Shimo quietly returned to the crowd. And a familiar voice rang in his ears. Check-in completed, task rewards are being issued. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the god's dream of a sword. Close black lens bracket chapter 5 unexpected check-in task. Seeking flowers for evaluation votes. Advertisement. A lot of kendo knowledge flooded into Shimo's mind. Weigh the sword. Shishui, the secret sword swallows back, the remnant image cuts before stepping. Different from promised swordsmanship, God Dream 1 sword style contains a large number of sword moves in addition to its own swordsmanship genre. The seemingly ordinary swordsmanship contains the spiritual ideas of this genre. In fact, God's dream of a sword flow was born out of Juhedao, also known as the way of drawing a sword or the technique of drawing a sword. Pay attention to the confrontation of swordsmanship in an instant. The moment the sword is unsheathed, life or death. Advertisement. Shimo closed his eyes and tried to digest a lot of knowledge to improve his kendo level. At this time, Miyano Kaide has already started his teaching content for today. Let's start with the basics of cutting technique, and when it talked about the most critical moment, there was a sudden pause. He looked in the direction. Shimo was a little surprised, his eyes filled with a look called incredible. The new sword? It's completely different from the sharpness just now. Advertisement, grasping but not sending out, cultivating the sword's edge, is a battle to comprehend a new sword intent. What a terrible young man, Miyano Feng thought to himself, but the narration in his mouth did not stop. In addition to the kendo teacher, Aburai Renji also seems to have noticed the emergence of a new sword intent. He looked at Shimo's back rather unwillingly, with a bitter taste at the corners of his mouth. Is this the gap? Chapter 6 Unexpected check-in task, seeking flowers for evaluation votes? Advertisement. A lot of kendo knowledge flooded into Shimo's mind. Weigh the sword. Shishui, the secret sword swallows back, the remnant image cuts before stepping. Different from promised swordsmanship, God Dream 1 sword style contains a large number of sword moves in addition to its own swordsmanship genre. The seemingly ordinary swordsmanship contains the spiritual ideas of this genre. In fact, God's dream of a sword flow was born out of Juhedao, also known as the way of drawing a sword or the technique of drawing a sword. Pay attention to the confrontation of swordsmanship in an instant. The moment the sword is unsheathed, life or death. Shimo closed his eyes and tried to digest a lot of knowledge to improve his kendo level. At this time, Miyano Kaide has already started his teaching content for today. Let's start with the basics of cutting technique, and when it talked about the most critical moment, there was a sudden pause. He looked in the direction. Shimo was a little surprised, his eyes filled with a look called incredible. The new sword? It's completely different from the sharpness just now. Grasping but not sending out, cultivating the sword's edge, is a battle to comprehend a new sword intent? What a terrible young man, Miyano Feng thought to himself, but the narration in his mouth did not stop. In addition to the kendo teacher, Aburai Renji also seems to have noticed the emergence of a new sword intent. He looked at Shimo's back rather unwillingly, with a bitter taste at the corners of his mouth. Is this the gap? At this time, Asanwa Renji deeply realized the meaning of Shihei's words. Those who are defeated by me, even if I give you time to catch up, will gradually become invisible. After a few minutes, Shimo slowly opened his eyes, and a restrained sword intent flashed through the pitch-black pupils. Advertisement, knowledge is a bit mixed. Shimo knocked his head, frowning slightly. Whether it is promised swordsmanship or God's dream of swordsmanship, as a swordsmanship genre that has been developed for thousands of years, the knowledge contained in it is extremely huge. Fortunately, it is still within acceptable limits. Shimo stretched his brows and looked at Kaide Miyano, who was standing in front of him. Seping noticed his gaze. Miyano Kaide paused slightly and nodded at him. Obviously, in Miyano Kaide's heart, this new student already occupies a very high position in his heart. And all of this seems to be Shimo's strength in exchange for it. In the first kendo class, Miyano Kaide did not talk about too esoteric content. The content of the lecture still stays on the most basic cutting technique. Soon after the class was over, everyone rushed to Miyano Kaide to bow and thank, and the traditional etiquette was developed to ultimate in the Spiritual Arts Academy. As a reserve player, shinigami, the courses for the students of the Spiritual Arts Academy are arranged very slowly. After the kendo class is over, it is the white hits class. Because the talents of the students are uncertain, so in the early stage, every course cannot be left. Shimo originally looked forward to triggering a new check-in task again in the next white hits class. However, the facts are often the opposite of what we imagined. Nothing in the system, although a little lost, but they can only choose to accept. Mr. Shinigami, who teaches white hits, is a little short, dressed in a black and broad haori, and looks a little bit oblique. But for the teacher, the students seemed very jealous. The sound of discussions in the kendo class from time to time disappeared instantly when I arrived here. The logo of Wengsao has already explained its identity. In Shimonoseki town, Shimosaka, I will be your teacher for some time to come.
Advertisement. A simple introduction makes people realize that this teacher seems to be a decisive person.
Then he started his own teaching. What makes Shimo a little strange is that there are not only one class of students in the class. He saw a petite figure not far from his seat. The familiar curled tail hairstyle makes people's gaze a little hesitant. With deep purple eyes, he looked at the teacher on the podium very seriously, and carefully noted every word he said. From time to time, she records the key points of the lecture at the desk, looking like a triple good student. In this case, the knuckles have been maintained. Rukia Kuchiki turned his gaze a little shame, and looked to his right not far away. But I saw a handsome young man looking at her with a look that she didn't know how to describe. Shimo always looked at Rukia Kuchiki with admiration. It was this stubborn girl who looked a bit fierce. The two looked at each other, their eyes staying for a long time. Until Kuchiki Kiyochiya got hot, she turned her head back again in anger. Weirdo. Muttering in her heart, Shimo smiled slightly, didn't care, and said silently in his heart. Interesting girl. Tai-Lai, he thought it would be a good start. However, the following development really made Shimo somewhat unable to cope. The time-limited check-in task has been released. Please check in at Rukia Kuchiki's dormitory, limited time 3 days. Quest reward. Reiatsu breakthrough, since Chapter 7 Genkia's attitude. Advertisement. Faced with the rewards of the new check-in task, Shiu said he could not calm down. If it's a new genre of Kendo, he might still struggle with it. But it comes to the root of shinigami, Reiatsu. How can this make people think of rejection? However, new problems appeared again. How can he bring up the topic of going to his dormitory after meeting Rukia Kuchiki for the first time? The student dormitories of Ziyang Spiritual Academy are all single rooms. The first time I met was to make this request, and it was no different from being a hooligan. It's not that I'm worried about being a hooligan. Shimo touched his chin with a tangled expression. The main reason is that after a certain Tsunere dead sister knows about this, he will directly raise the knife and slash me. The strange gaze suddenly shifted, and Rukia Kuchiki couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. However, there is an inexplicable sense of loss in her heart, which makes her mood a little irritable. Because you just arrived in an unfamiliar environment? Analyze Dawin Jinya's thoughts, and look in Shimo's direction wisely in the next chapter. Shimo frowned under the light vinegar sunlight, as if he was struggling with some kind of problem. Who is he? Why do you look at me with that look? Soon, she was once again attracted by the lecture content of Sakashidawan Town, and took notes seriously at the desk. Shimo inadvertently swept the other party's notes, and a method that was not a solution came to his mind. It seems that Ping has room for manipulation. The White Hits class soon ended, and Mr. Sakashida's decisive character seemed to have been incorporated into his bones. When he arrived at the end of get out of class time, even if he had not finished talking about the current point, he did not hesitate to announce the end of get out of class. Then he hurriedly left the classroom. Shimo glanced at the direction he was leaving, which seemed to be the gate of Spiritual Arts Academy. After becoming a teacher of the Spiritual Academy, do you still have to continue to perform the tasks of the squad? Although a little puzzled, he didn't care too much. Advertisement. The students in the classroom also stood up from their seats and walked towards their next classroom. The full curriculum made Shimo feel nostalgic for the high school years he experienced in his previous life. It seems very similar, it's just that the things to learn are completely different. Snapped. A stack of notebooks fell in front of Shimo. He turned his head in astonishment and looked at the person in front of him. Rukia Kuchiki looked at him ferociously with a condescending posture. Hey, why did you look at me with that look just now? Rukia Kuchiki always solves problems when there is a problem, and has never been a person accustomed to avoiding. The puffy face, the reddish color crawls on the cheeks. It seems to be angry, but it reveals a sense of coquettishness, which makes people unable to be afraid of getting nervous. Nothing. It's just looking at beautiful things from a perspective of appreciation. Shimo looked at Rukia Kuchiki's eyes with a very serious attitude and said word by word. Get to know, Kyōraku Shimo. Kuchiki Lakia hesitated, but with an attitude of being kind to others, she introduced herself. Need Kia. No mention of the surname Kuchiki, so Shimo was slightly stunned. It seems that Gakuya Kuchiki hasn't touched Rukia yet. Very good name. Before Shimo finished speaking, he was interrupted by Rukia. Wait, what do you mean by what you just said? Rukia has used the 4 words of the basics to ultimate. Just to praise you for looking good. Shimo felt helpless. How can a seemingly intelligent girl commit a crime in such a thing? Advertisement. For a while, the girl's cheeks became hot and red, and there seemed to be steam rising above her head. This kind of treatment seems to be the first time I have met. When I was in the hanging area before, I was mixed up between the garbage dump and various vendors. Robbing, stealing, cheating, do everything in order to survive. No one has ever said something like that. Faced with this situation for the first time, it was quite difficult for the girl to adapt. This. Shimo stretched out his hand and rubbed the soft black hair lightly when he didn't react. Don't worry about it. I still need to go to the next class. The warm touch from her head made Rukia stunned. She didn't react until Shimo walked out of the classroom. Say, damn it, when I'm not paying attention.
She hurried a few steps, trying to catch up with Shimo.
But when he walked out of the classroom, he could no longer see Shimo. Oops. It's almost time for class, and I'm almost late. Rukia looked at the rare students in the spiritual academy and finally realized that something was wrong. She hurriedly walked towards the next classroom. After passing through several circular corridors, I finally saw the classroom for this class. Calligraphy classroom. Kia looked at the words on the door. This is it. With that said, she pushed the door and entered. What caught my eye was a teacher with a gentle expression. Under the black-framed lenses, a look of tolerance was revealed, and a deep voice sounded in the classroom. This classmate, you are late. Chapter 8 Calligraphy teacher. New book asks for flowers, asks for evaluation votes, asks for support.
Advertisement. Sorry. Rukia embraced the note in her arms, bent down deeply and said nervously.
I was late for the first class, which is really too much. Even if the teacher looks good to talk, just be careful next time. The calligraphy teacher motioned to Rukia to enter the classroom. Genkia walked a few steps upright, preparing to find an empty place to sit down.
But when she looked around, she realized that the place seemed to be full.
Rukia, here. Just when she was a little nervous because of everyone's gaze, suddenly someone called her name.
Kia looked in the direction of the voice and saw a young man with a warm smile waving at her.
It's actually you. The moment she saw Shimo, she shouted loudly, and immediately attracted the teacher's eyes on the podium. When he noticed something was wrong, Rukia had to hurry up to Shimo and sat next to him. How can you be here? Seeing the gaze of the surrounding students gradually disappearing, Rukia asked with a fierce expression on his side. Shimo fiddling with the brush in his hand, trying to create art on the paper. There are just a few calligraphy teachers at Spiritual Arts Academy. A calligraphy teacher sometimes takes charge of multiple classes. After several attempts, Shimo finally chose to give up. Sometimes, I have to admit the importance of dry wealth. Obviously, Shimo has no talent for calligraphy. The fonts on the book and paper twisted their shape as best as they could, as if accusing Soul Society's strict hierarchy and oppression. On the podium, the calligraphy teacher officially started today's course. My name is Aizen Huyusuke, and I will be your calligraphy teacher for some time to come.
Advertisement. I have to say that Aizen's appeal is still extremely terrifying.
Gentle and calm voice, in-depth knowledge step by step, correct and elegant fonts. Like his own disguise, polite and well-knowing with such a teacher, the freshman students naturally express their joy. Only Shimo, under the seemingly calm expression, is always tense the string in his heart. After the whole class, Aizen Kuyusuke didn't seem to set his sights on himself. However, Shimo, who has a different sword intent, can vaguely perceive the strangeness of the whole body. What the hell is it? Shimo thought hard, why am I being targeted by Aizen? Is it because of Zanpakuto? Before entering the Spiritual Arts Academy, Shimo remembered clearly that he had never met Aizen and said a word. The only time I saw each other was after I came out of Hisana. Shimo felt that he had to figure out the reasons for this. With his right hand propped on his head, he inadvertently caught a glimpse of Rukia's work. Puff, puff ha ha ha. Shimo tried his best to suppress his laughter. Fortunately, Aizen allows students to practice freely. The surrounding environment is not as quiet as before. After realizing this, Shimo no longer suppressed himself, his laughter gradually became presumptuous. Rukia's fingers gradually tightened, and the knuckles came out a little white. Fool! Why are you laughing? When she realized that Shimo was staring at her work, Genkia felt she was offended. Ben, I thought it was bad enough for me to have no mouse in calligraphy. Shimo made no secret, I didn't expect you to be more rescued than me. Click it. As soon as he said this, the brush in Rukia's hand broke. Advertisement born in Rukongai, the question she needs to think about every day is how to survive. Things like calligraphy that involve art are not something she can touch at all. So when he manipulated that brush, Rukia was already a little impatient. Damn it, idiot Shimo, I don't think you are any better. Rukia saw Shimo's work and mocked mercilessly. The font like a tortoise crawls fully shows your contempt for this art. As the quarrel began, Rukia didn't notice that the relationship between her and Shimo also became much closer in an instant. Aizen on the podium is actually looking here all the time. For Shimo, a freshman student, he still cares a lot. At the exit of the narrow, the peculiar power around his soul gave him a weird feeling. Although when we meet again, that peculiar power has disappeared. But Aizen didn't think Shimo had lost this power. After the photo, this power should be hidden by itself. But now, why are these two people quarreling? Aizen feels that as a teacher, it is necessary to manage it. By the way, let's get in touch with this young man from Kyōraku's family. He left his position and walked slowly from the podium to the two of them. When Aizen came, both of them stopped arguing. Lin Kia was a little bit ambitious in her heart. I was late for the teacher's first class, and then I quarreled with this fool, Shimo. It must have left a very bad impression on Aizen. Thinking of this, she glared at Shimo fiercely, but it was a pity that there was no lethality. Aizen noticed the two works on the table for the first time. He has always been calm, and he failed to control his emotions in front of strangers for the first time. There is no other reason, it is because these words are so ugly. Chapter 9 Knife Zen, The Weird World of Time, Seeking Flowers. Advertisement practicing calligraphy for hundreds of years, for the sake of self-cultivation. Aizen never expected that he would break his work here. This is your work? He quickly readjusted his emotions and asked in a gentle manner.
Rukia lowered his head, seemingly embarrassed. Obviously, she also knew that her writing was bad.
On the contrary, Shimo next to him nodded vigorously with a very proud expression and said, "Yes, after my investigation, no one has been able to write in the same font as mine. So, I named it Shimo Body." After listening to this, Aizen's eyes widened slightly, a trace of surprise flashed through his brown pupils. He had never seen such a brazen person. Is this something other people can write? Obviously it is too ugly, causing others to be reluctant to even take a look. He actually gave such an ugly font and named it after himself. Aizen struggled for a long time and didn't even know where to start. Go on. After hesitating for a long time, he can only encourage. If I was going to inquire before, I was swallowed back. Speaking of words, Aizen quickened his pace and walked away from the two of them. It's really that work, it's too unbearable to look directly at it. After he walked away, Rukia stared at Shimo with a very fierce look. She understood. The reason why I am so unlucky today is entirely because I met this person. You are the thickest skinned I have ever seen. Advertisement. Shimo nodded with deep conviction and said, "Thank you for the compliment." Genkia became angry and lost. Damn it, I can't get the upper hand in front of this person at all. After the calligraphy class, the two temporarily parted ways. Although Kia threatened to never see Shimo again. But this matter can't help her. For the next lesson, Shimo temporarily lost interest. Shunpo's study was already completed when he was at Kyōraku's house. Although it is not as good as the shinigami of the second division, who are mainly Shunpo, it is possible to go beyond the ordinary shinigami. After finishing today's course, Shimo returned to his dormitory first. There are many doubts in his mind. When you can't ask others, you can only find answers from yourself.
Shimo placed the sealed state on the half-dry futon, holding his breath and concentrating, trying to enter the sword meditation.
Fortunately, his talent in this area seems to be good. After just a few minutes, Shimo entered the Zanpakuto space smoothly. Familiar scenes appeared in front of them. The various clocks and watches in the entire space of Chabugan are constantly running. The ticking sound echoes here. In addition, Shimo still can't see any creatures that might be his Zanpakuto. As for the real name, there is no way to know. The weird Zanpakuto space, the dazed and clueless Shimo, constitute a picture that ordinary people cannot understand. The young man dressed in a wide black university uniform, stepped on the road composed of countless clocks and watches, and constantly explored and searched forward. Here, Shimo could not perceive the passage of time. It is so dry that it cannot perceive any dynamic or static changes. He tried to observe the clocks around him, but he came to the conclusion that there is no difference from the normal clocks. Advertisement. This discovery made it even more tangled. How do you talk about seizing the flow? Shihei scratched his head, feeling the pain in his forehead more and more. He was not a person who was good at thinking, but he came across such a Zanpakuto. It stands to reason that Zanpakuto should have something to do with the essence of his soul. However, Shimo can't see anything familiar at the moment. Now, the only thing that can be explored is this long and endless road underfoot. Shimo gritted his teeth and continued to walk forward. 1 step and 2 steps, 3 steps and 4 steps. At first, he tried to count the steps silently in his heart. But as the path gradually increased, Shimo's patience was constantly wasted. Until later, he had given up this meaningless move. I don't know how long it has passed, but there is still no change in the clock ahead. Shimo perceives himself, except for the unstable mentality, there is no change at all in other aspects. Everything, is it still? He stopped, looked at the surrounding clocks, and muttered. In other words, these jokes are all liars? As soon as the voice fell, the watch space began to collapse. The broken space gives people an inexplicable sense of horror. Everything goes to nothing. When the watch space almost collapsed, Shimo felt the blur of his consciousness. He understood that this was the light that was about to leave the Zanpakuto space. Shimo tried to open his eyes, observing the changing world, trying to find his own Zanpakuto. In a daze, he vaguely saw an immortal throne made up of countless clocks and watches appeared in the emptiness in the distance. Not seeing the master of the throne, but also extremely majestic. Chapter 10 The Power of Time, Seeking Flowers, Advertisement. Shimo let out a long sigh, and has escaped from the sword Zen. The body is a bit stiff, and the joints seem to be rusty. How long have I been sitting here? Shimo looked at the clock on the table, his pupils shrank suddenly. 1 second. His tone was full of disbelief. Although there is a Zanpakuto space, there is no time change for reference. But after walking a long time, he can still perceive it. It seems that my Zanpakuto still has many secrets. Having said that, Shimo couldn't help but think of the throne after the world collapsed. Who is it for? What kind of people are qualified to sit on it? A long way to go. Shimo sighed and stood up from the futon. Aizen's attention caused a rare sense of crisis in his heart. If there is someone who needs to be vigilant among the lobbyists, Aizen Moyasuke is undoubtedly the most important one. Planning a conspiracy for hundreds of years, ruining almost half of Yu Lingting's high-end combat power. No matter from which point of view, Aizen is a very dangerous person. In order to be able to have the power of self-protection faster, Shimo decided to do a very important thing. He cleaned the room and walked out hastily. If I remember correctly, Sakia should have waited in this direction.
Shimo stopped at the door of the dormitory, remembered for a moment, and then walked towards the north. Soon, a more dense student dormitory appeared in front of him.
How come there are so many dormitories? Shimo took a breath, frowning.
The student dormitories are collectively located in the same area, and the wooden rooms are connected by corridors.
Advertisement. Although the dormitory has its own house number and the name of the student living in it.
But it's still difficult to find Rukia's dormitory from it.
Until Shimo saw Shinigami, who was in charge of managing the dormitory. Excuse me, does the teacher know where Rukia's dormitory is? On weekdays, Shimo does not oppress people as a nobleman. But this does not prevent him from enjoying some of the power from the superior nobility. The Shinigami noticed the family logo on Shimo's clothing, and after realizing that the other party was the family of the superior noble Kyōraku. This Shinigami answered very decisively, Rukia, it should be in the 7th dormitory. The specific house number is a bit unclear, but I can. He hasn't finished speaking yet, Shimo has disappeared from his eyes.
The flash of the figure caused the Shinigami's pupils to shrink suddenly.
Guru. He swallowed hard, feeling a bit dry in his throat.
Shunpo at this level has already surpassed the seats in the team, right?
Shimo just used the step just for convenience, but at the moment of using Shunpo, he finally realized that the situation was wrong. My Shunpo seems to be faster, what the hell does this happen? Shimo stopped, perceiving calmly, Reiatsu, time. Zanpakuto. He subconsciously looked at his waist. Zanpakuto in the sealed state rested quietly on his waist, without the slightest change. When there is pressure from my physical users, the time round seems to have become even slower. Shimo stood in the hallway of the dormitory, lost in thought. It should be related to my previous entry into the Zanpakuto space.
Advertisement. It wasn't until this time that Shimo remembered what happened to the cow in Hazama.
The moment Zanpakuto initially possessed the time system, he entered the Zanpakuto space directly. If nothing else, this should have a certain relationship with the system. However, coming out of it, he was contaminated with the power of time. And this is exactly why Aizen noticed himself. It is estimated that only the strong of Aizen's level can notice the difference in time. If you change to someone else, you might think that Shunpo is faster. Will the sword Zen become stronger? Shimo's pupils are shining with a strange light, and he has discovered a new way to become stronger. In that case, put the practice of sword meditation on the agenda. No recognition result. A two-pronged approach, you will have the power of Master's destiny as soon as possible. For a while, Shimo's heart surged. Ever since, I speeded up Shunpo's journey to the 7th dormitory. After a simple investigation, Shimo saw a wooden sign with the word Rukia in this corridor dormitory. Ahem. Shimo sorted his thoughts when he was about to knock on the door. The door of the dormitory in front of him suddenly opened. Boom. The petite body hit Shimo's chest directly. The recoil made Rukia fall back unsuspectingly. Seeing this scene, Shimo subconsciously stretched out his hand to protect his back and embraced her in his arms. The eyes were facing each other, and the air seemed to freeze for a while. After a short period of cherishing God, Rukia's face changed from normal to red in an instant, spreading to the base of his ears. A trace of panic flashed in the dark purple eyes, and at the moment when he recovered, Rukia hurriedly broke free from Shimo's arms. The single bangs in front of Rukia's forehead throbbed stubbornly, seeming to express her own emotions. Why are you here? Chapter 11 Reiatsu Breakthrough, seeking flowers evaluation ticket support. Advertisement, I said I'm here to study, do you believe it? Shimo's Jado is extremely sincere, naturally, Rukia would not believe this kind of nonsense. She put on an expression of suspicion, staring at Shi firmly, her face was still red. Frankly tell your purpose, otherwise, I will call the teacher. The dormitory of Spiritual Arts Academy is divided into multiple areas, each area has this Shinigami who is responsible for student safety. Shimo's old face collapsed, always thinking about himself. My excuse and Jidu that I was seamlessly dressed that day, where did I get the sand? To tell you, it's really related to learning. Shimo insisted on what he said, in the self-teaching class before, I saw you have notes. So I want to borrow it and transcribe it. This is the best excuse Shimo can think of. After listening to his explanation, Rukia's expression seemed to relax a bit. I don't know why, she seems to believe the words of the person in front of her easily. In that case, I'll get it for you. Rukia's answer was a bit beyond Shimo's expectations. This is not the expansion he wanted. If Rukia is asked to bring him the notes, how can the task be completed? The check-in task is right in front of you, how can you give up halfway? In this regard, Shimo prepared another set of plans. No need. I have a pen and paper. Under the stunned sunlight of Vecchia, Shimo took out a pen and paper from his student uniform. Although I am not good at calligraphy, I am very knowledgeable about hard pen transcription. It's just a class note, 5 minutes at most. Seeing Shimo's sincere gaze, Rukia didn't know what was going on. I can't even raise the slightest thought of rejection. Tangled for a long time, advertisement Genkia's brows were finally stretched out. Okay, but you can't laugh at me. Shimo's expression was a little dazed. Before he understood the meaning of this sentence, Rukia had already given him a way to enter the dormitory. Passing through the entrance, what you see is the private world that belongs to Rukia. The pink interior fully embodies the girl's heart. The bunny dolls and decorations that can be seen everywhere show that the owner of the room has spent a lot of thought on this.
The lines on Shimo's face gradually softened, and he whispered softly.
Very beautiful room. Really? A bright light flashed in Wenkia's eyes, and she asked with a squat.
She obviously cares about the recognition of others.
Especially when the one in front of him doesn't make him feel sick. His words are full of weight, of course it's true. Shimo has lived in Yulingding for many years, and he knows all about other areas except for combat. These bunny dolls should all be the latest styles from Qianzhen's doll shop? It's very popular with girls. Rukia lowered her head, her hair hanging down, hiding her expression. Alright. Shimo didn't pay too much attention to the changes in Rukia's expression, but instead focused part of his mind on the sound that had just appeared in his mind. Ding! The check-in starts. Please stay in the dormitory for 10 minutes to complete the check-in task. Close black lens bracket. Shimo breathed a sigh of relief. It's good to choose an excuse that can be justified. After a moment of silence, Rukia seemed to finally come back to his senses, remembering Shimo's purpose here. Come on for me, the notes are in the study. The conditions in the student dormitory of Spiritual Arts Academy are quite good. In addition to the study room, there are many different rooms such as training room and quiet room. Following Rukia, Shimo came to her study. The simple structure does not show the slightest mess. Advertisement. When Rukia looked through her notes and was about to pass it to Shimo, it seems that suddenly remembered something, and many more. The white arms that had been stretched halfway through, suddenly retracted. Let me read it to you. The smile on Rukia's face was a bit stiff, as if hiding some secret. In this regard, she naturally did not continue to inquire.
He sat down in front of the desk, placed his pen and paper, and looked at his heart with a focused expression.
Rukia breathed a sigh of relief when he saw this. White hits are the basic skills necessary for shinigami to refine. The crisp sound like a bell rang in Shimo's ear, accompanied by the rustle of writing. Compose a quiet chapter. A serious girl, a focused teenager, the pictures in the study are extremely harmonious. Time passed by every minute. What makes Shimo a little strange is that Rukia is far more focused on learning than him. All the points that the second division teacher said, she recorded in her notebook. This also caused Shimo to spend a lot of time in transcribing. Until, another mechanical voice rang in his mind. Check-in is completed, rewards are being issued. Open black lens bracket. Successful release of paddle incentives, pressure breakthrough. As soon as the voice of the system fell, an ominous premonition emerged in Shimo's heart. He subconsciously stretched out his hand to hold Rukia in his arms again, so hard that Rukia, who was still at a loss, thought that Shimo wanted to strangle him. The next moment, a sudden change, spiritual power, like the ocean tide, continuously emerged from the inside of the body. Its dark eyes are as bright as stars. Boom. The spiritual power of the stone monument converges into a terrifying Reiatsu, which suddenly blooms with Shimo as the center. The entire Naoyang Spiritual Academy, even in the spiritual palace, but I perceive this horror Reiatsu. Countless shinigami stopped their work and looked in the direction of the Spiritual Arts Academy with a shocked expression. Chapter 12. Great Influence, Seeking Flowers for Evaluation Votes. Advertisement. Although I had already prepared in my heart, this situation was still something that Shimo had expected. The reason why he held Rukia in his arms was entirely because he didn't want the sudden burst of Reiatsu to hurt her. Fortunately, Rukia also reacted in time. Her petite body shrank into Shimo's arms, not daring to make extra moves. Such a terrifying pressure, even beyond her imagination. Rukia looked up, looked at Shimo's profile, and said to herself, "Who is he? Why is there such a huge and terrifying Reiatsu?" Curiosity, like spring weeds, continued to spread and grow in her heart at this moment. The warm embrace is a feeling she has never experienced before. For a while, Rukia was a little obsessed with it. Shimo cried secretly in his heart, trying his best to control the spiritual power surging in his body. Before entering the Spiritual Arts Academy, all he did was to accumulate spiritual power. There was an ambition who almost subverted the three realms, once said. Shinigami's battle is Reiatsu's battle, although there is a certain BV in this sentence. But it also explains most of the fighting situation. Reiatsu, the importance of Shinigami is already self-evident. Without Zanpakuto, Shimo devoted himself to spiritual practice. As a result, before he entered the Spiritual Arts Academy, he already had Reiatsu at the rank of deputy captain. The oppression of terror surpasses the entire north of the Spiritual Arts Academy, and even has a tendency to spread. Fortunately, Shimo itself has good control after the Queen's discussion, the shore staff pressure gradually eased. At this time, Yu Lingting's 8th Division team house. The middle-aged man lying on his back on top of the house sighed deeply. Oh, I wanted to take advantage of this time to take a break. I didn't expect this kid to cause such a big noise. It seems that the holiday is over early. Let's go to Old Man Sean first. Advertisement. The voice fell, and the figure above the house had disappeared, leaving a faint fragrance of wine.
At the same time, the 5th Division team house. Aizen, who was writing calligraphy at his desk, stopped the brush in his hand and looked in the direction of the Spiritual Arts Academy.
Some familiar Reiatsu fluctuates. With an unpredictable smile on the corner of his mouth, he showed his gentle temperament to ultimate. Not long ago, in the team house, Yamamoto Genkasai Rikoku and set about the village to look at each other with his disciples. Are you saying that you are all responsible for Reiatsu? The majestic voice sounded in the team house. Kyōraku Shunsui was a little helpless, and lamented his lost vacation, sighed.
The owner of Reiatsu is a child of our Kyōraku family.
Boom. The cane hits the floor with a dull noise. The old man knows, then this matter will be left to you. I will order the suspension of investigations on this. 1. Ziyang Spiritual Academy, Dormitory number 7, perceiving the disappearance of Reiatsu around him, Rukia also hurriedly broke free from Shimo's arms like a frightened small mistress. Her expression is very strange. There was a bit of hesitation in the entanglement and a bit of curiosity. It seemed that what happened just now was beyond her comprehension.
But Rukia feels even more uncomfortable, but her unspeakable nostalgia in Shimo's arms.
What's wrong with me? She was a little dazed in her heart. Rukia, who has never experienced anything like this, has clearly come to the point of choice. Shimo didn't know where to start for a while. Advertisement. Actually, this incident is just a simple accident. On a whim, there is no way for Reiatsu to break through. Hearing his explanation, Kia became angry for a while. Whose Reiatsu have you seen? Can you break through on a whim? No need to explain. Rukia seemed extremely empathetic at this time. Everyone has his own secret. We're just an ordinary classmate relationship now, you don't need to explain too much to me. Shimo was slightly taken aback. Rukia's words were a bit beyond his expectation. At the same time, it also gave him a deeper understanding of this girl. Before going to the Spiritual Arts Academy in the future, Kia also experienced a lot of equalization. She was able to say this, as if she had gradually begun to recognize herself in her heart. Thinking of this, Shimo's expression slightly changed, and he smiled. Thank you for understanding. Rukia seemed to notice that the atmosphere was a bit off, and hurriedly changed the subject. Notes you right before she finished speaking, she noticed that the environment around the two of them had changed greatly. Under the shock of the terrifying Reiatsu, the complete object can hardly be seen. Teachers from the college are also long overdue. Fortunately, because of Shimo's identity, the other party didn't have too many details. However, a new problem has also arisen, the arrangement of Rukia dormitory. Mr. Shinigami frowned and looked back and forth between the two. After a while, he asked tentatively, or, Rukia, you will move to Shimo's dormitory? Chapter 13. Visit by Kyōraku Shunsui. Please ask for flowers, ask for evaluation votes. Advertisement. When she heard this, Rukia's face flushed suddenly, as if she was about to bleed. The strands of steam rise from the onion hair, and the head seems to be burning. Obviously, this teacher is also a man of temperament. I don't want him to misestimate the relationship between the two. Although Shimo wants to agree to Rukia, but she has to take care of her emotions. Think about this later. As soon as he said this, Rukia looked at Shimo with a surprised look. Ahem, I mean you have to follow the rules of the Spiritual Academy. 1 dormitory per student, this is standard. The teacher seems to have not recovered. Many of the students in the Spiritual Academy live together. If you want, I can apply for you. At that moment, his eyes gleamed, and his voice could not help but increase by 2 degrees. Real. Boom. Before the teacher could respond, Shimo only felt a solid punch in the chest. Fool. Shia ran away noisily. Looking at her leaving back, Shimo vaguely saw her red earlobe. There is a teacher in charge between 2 people, patrolling back and forth with a strange look. Okay, stop being curious. Shimo Nunu mouth, motioned, teacher is pleased for the aftermath. The master teacher converged on 8 trigrams and nodded. Give it to me. Shimo didn't chase Rukia advertisement. Let her slow down for the time being. Be bearable. He went back to his dormitory alone. Reiatsu, who broke through to the captain level, had to spend some time familiarizing Shimo. Opening the door, a character who made Shimo a little surprised, lay on his side. The slightly curly brown hair was tied into a ponytail and scattered around the back, with fancy alarms pinned on both sides. Wearing a pink haori coat embroidered with patterns, Ryoshikasa is placed next to him, and a tea set filled with tea is placed on the table in front of him. Shimo sighed when he saw this person, and said helplessly. I stupidly defeated Gisang. Why are you here? it was none other than the captain of the Godei 13th Division, Kyōraku Shunsui. At the same time, he is also Kyōraku Shimo's uncle, his biggest backstage. Kyōraku Shunsui seemed to have been used to Shimo's communication method and didn't care.
He sat upright, propped Hujien on his chin, and looked straight at Shiwei standing in front of him.
It's really surprising. I didn't expect your kid to hide so deeply. Shimo continued to sigh, while sitting cross-legged across from Kyōraku Shunsui, facing his eyes. You seem to have never paid attention to my practice, right? Upon hearing this, Kyōraku Shunsui chuckled twice, concealing the gradually embarrassing atmosphere around him. Haha, isn't it because I am the captain of the squad? You also know that the captain of the squad has to deal with a lot of official duties on weekdays, so he can't take care of anything when he is busy. In response, Shimo Pavilion relentlessly dismantled the platform and said, Isn't it because Nanauji has been dealing with the affairs of the 8th Division? You seem to have nothing more than drinking, chatting and sleeping, right? Pin feared that the air was suddenly quiet. The atmosphere gradually became awkward. Fortunately, being able to become a squad captain has a face that ordinary people can compare. Advertisement Kyōraku Shunsui corrected the color and said seriously. Shimo, do you know that the incident of Reiatsu's breakthrough has alarmed the captain?
Shimo glanced at him contemptuously. The way to divert the topic is very stiff. This is also something that can't be helped. I think the captains only know about this matter.
Kyōraku Shunsui nodded and admitted, Yes, but you don't have to worry. I have pointed out this matter, but there is one thing you need to remember. Shimo converged in slack, sat down. I have a preliminary understanding of your admission score before coming here. The new student's Kendo is number 1, and it's not ashamed of the Kyōraku family.
But because of the Reiatsu incident, you have officially entered the sight of all the captains of Shaolingting.
The School of Spirituality is over. The selection of the team will be the first test you face. Damn yourself this nephew. Kyōraku Shunsui holds drought as his heart.
When he had no intention of marrying and having children, the burden of reproduction of the Kyōraku family would be all weighed on Shimo.
I thought you would say something. Shimo relaxed, waved and said. Which team to go to? I have already thought about it. Kyōraku Shunsui was tasting the hot tea in his hand, and there was a slight lesson on his face, and asked. Which team? Say in advance, the 8th Division won't accept you. Shimo glanced at the unscrupulous elder Anger and said solemnly.
4th Division. Chapter 14 The Power of Time, Seeking for Flowers and Evaluation Votes.
Advertisement, ahem. Kyōraku Shunsui did not get killed by the tea in his mouth. He asked again dazedly, Can you say that again? Which team? Shimo repeated. 4th Division. Kyōraku Shunsui's resolute attitude has never been seen before. He looked at Shimo seriously, after realizing that he was not joking. Kyōraku Shunsui put down the cup in his hand, tapped on the tabletop, frowning slightly. After a moment of thinking, he asked, Can you tell me the reason? Regarding this, Kido without hesitation, because I am very interested in Kido. Also, fighting is not suitable for me. What's more, when you are not going to marry a wife and have children, I have to consider Kyōraku's inheritance. On the battlefield, it means casualties. Obviously, Shimo is very easy to use when changing the subject or something. After a few words of Kabuto turned, the question was directed at Kyōraku Shunsui. Hearing these reasons, Kyōraku Shunsui was stunned, and immediately laughed. Since you have your own ideas, then I won't interfere more. Study in the spiritual academy and cherish the time here. Stagnation Palace is far from simple as you think. After that, he got up and left. Shimo still trusts his elder. At the same time, when he heard Kyōraku Shunsui's last words, he couldn't help falling into contemplation. Obviously, this squad captain, who seems to be lazy but is the most thoughtful, seems to have noticed something. Besides, should I converge? Shimo meditated, thinking about what he had done during this time. Advertisement, but soon, he laughed. The image has been planted in the hearts of the team leaders. What is the point of convergence now? The linking at the moment is like a muddy quagmire. If you are not careful, you may get stuck in it. All Shimo needs to do is to have the strength to overcome the dry quagmire, and that is enough. After thinking about this, Shimo gathered his mind and straightened his posture cross-legged. The sealed state is placed between his knees. He puts one hand on the tail of the knife pin, and the other hand strokes the blade, closing his eyes and paying attention. The focused mental state made him quickly re-enter the sword meditation. The repeated clock space, the unchanging path of time, once again appeared in front of Shimo. Didn't it collapse here? Does it rebuild every time I enter? Shimo has infinite questions in his heart, but in this space where he is alone, there is no answer at all. Everything can only be explored by himself. However, when he entered the Zanpakuto space this time, he had more confidence. After breaking through to Captain Reiatsu, Shimo seems to be several times stronger than when he came in last time. I hope I can see clearly what is on the throne this time. Shimo strengthened his confidence and burst out his own Reiatsu on the road of doing time. The mighty Reiatsu centered on him, instantly spreading. Countless clocks and watches shattered and collapsed at this moment. Reiatsu, like a sea tide, surging for a while, impacting the world. Shimo's face was firm, staring straight ahead, waiting for the world to change. The endless nothingness appeared in front of him again. The fragments of the clock melted into the darkness, leaving nothing behind. The darkness ahead, like a windy lake, surging gently. The throne rose in the darkness of nothingness, and countless clocks clustered on the throne in various twists. What disappointed Shimo happened. There was no one on the throne. Then the problem is coming. He looked around, his expression gradually serious. Where is my Zanpakuto? Advertisement. Shimo now seriously suspects that he has entered a fake Zanpakuto space. The false world of clocks and watches, the fragile road to time. Captain Reiatsu's slow hair is able to completely destroy it. Then came the endless darkness and nothingness, and the throne of nothingness. The answer to the question now lies on the throne. Shimo tried to walk towards the throne. However, when it steps into nothingness, the path of time reappears under its feet. Different from the flat before. The accumulation of countless clocks and watches has formed a step by step. Under Shimo's surprised gaze, the throne gradually rose to an unreachable height. What Zhang Si? Should I go over? Shimo tried to step up the steps. The moment the soles of his feet touched the steps, the terrifying oppressive force instantly overwhelmed him. Shimo gritted his teeth and confronted with Reiatsu, which relieved part of the pressure. Just like a high mountain pressing on the top, even moving a finger is extremely difficult. Although relying on his tenacious perseverance, he climbed the first step. However, when Shimo tried to reach the second step, even more terrifying pressure came. At the next moment, he was confused, and he left the Zanpakuto space directly. Shimo regained consciousness, panting heavily. The oppressive force-like substance has brought an unimaginable burden to it. Under the body, sweating profusely, and directly wet the student uniform that had just been changed. However, it is not without gain. Shimo barely stretched out a finger, with a peculiar power lingering on it. The power of time. The corners of his mouth raised slightly, and his eyes were full of brilliance. Chapter 15. Another check-in task, and trust, seeking flowers and tickets for rewards. Advertisement. Initially trying to stretch the time for 9 times, Shimo found that he could slightly accelerate his own time. And, acting on some inanimate objects, as for shinigami or ryukan, the power of his time is temporarily unable to affect. Of course, it is also possible that the effect is minimal, and Shimo has not been able to find it for the time being. However, he was very satisfied with this. According to the analysis of the canyon theory of relativity spread in previous lives, his own time plus admonition is relatively dry, that is, the enemy's time minus admonition. Advertisement. Details make a difference. Among the masters, how small a change may change the direction of the battle. What's more, this is only the second time he has entered the Zanpakuto space. Shimo believes that as the number of steps up the stairs increases, he will inevitably have more and more time powers he can control, until he calls out Zanpakuto's real name and reaches Shikai, solve. After a short break, Shimo is ready to enter the state of sword meditation again for the second practice. However, at the moment he was about to enter the state, his consciousness suddenly became extremely drowsy, as if there was a heavy burden on his head. An unknown sound rang in his mind. Shimo realized that he could not enter the state of sword zen. Advertisement. He panted heavily, and finally realized that he seemed to only be able to perform sword meditation once a day. It may have a certain relationship with the power of time. Forget it. If you can't practice, just slow it down for a while. Continue to study the power of time. Put the thoughts of time back on the power of time. Chapter 16. Another check-in task, and trust, seeking flowers and tickets for rewards. Advertisement. Initially trying to stretch the time for 9 times, Shimo found that he could slightly accelerate his own time. And, acting on some inanimate objects, as for shinigami or ryukan, the power of his time is temporarily unable to affect. Of course, it is also possible that the effect is minimal, and Shimo has not been able to find it for the time being. However, he was very satisfied with this. According to the analysis of the canyon theory of relativity spread in previous lives, his own time plus admonition is relatively dry, that is, the enemy's time minus admonition. Details make a difference. Among the masters, how small a change may change the direction of the battle. What's more, this is only the second time he has entered the Zanpakuto space. Shimo believes that as the number of steps up the stairs increases, he will inevitably have more and more time powers he can control, until he calls out Zanpakuto's real name and reaches Shikai, solve. After a short break, Shimo is ready to enter the state of sword meditation again for the second practice. However, at the moment he was about to enter the state, his consciousness suddenly became extremely drowsy, as if there was a heavy burden on his head. An unknown sound rang in his mind. Shimo realized that he could not enter the state of sword zen. He panted heavily, and finally realized that he seemed to only be able to perform sword meditation once a day. It may have a certain relationship with the power of time. Forget it. If you can't practice, just slow it down for a while. Continue to study the power of time. Put the thoughts of time back on the power of time. He held the futon under him to conduct various experiments, such as whether the amount of spiritual power released would cause a change in the power of time. How powerful is it to use the power of time with all your strength? After half an hour, Shimo stopped various experiments. He touched his chin, stared at the futon in front of him and muttered to himself. Advertisement. The highest is double the time to add remonstrance, acting on the dead or oneself. It will continuously consume oneself during the cast. Reiatsu. To explode the power of time, barely able to stop the time, affecting the radius of 1 meter centered on me. Unfortunately, it can only stop for a millisecond at most. In addition, Shimo has related speculations. The opponent in his time range, if the stronger, the effect may be smaller. A long way to go, he sighed, feeling that his strength still has a huge shortcoming.
It seems that Shimo's unwillingness was sensed, and the new check-in mission was released in due course. The new check-in task has been released. Please check in the Kido class, and master 10 kinds of Kido. Close black lens bracket.
Quest reward. Kido Grandmaster, another task with an unclear reward. Shimo stared at the task for a long time before moving away from the sun. 10 kinds of Kido. He rubbed his sweat-wet hair, his expression returning to laziness. From a certain perspective, the faces of Shimo and Kyōraku Shunsui at this time are quite similar. Maybe it's because the family doesn't enter the house, the two people's personalities are similar to some extent. Bang bang. After Shimo cleaned up his dormitory, there was a knock on the door outside. He opened the door with some doubts. This time, who is looking for me? What catches the eye is a petite body, with his head down deeply, and the reddish skin can be vaguely seen from the black hair. Then, come and help me move things, Shankia said, stuttering. What's the meaning? Seeing it behaved like this, Shimo was even more at a loss for Monk Jong-er, completely confused. Advertisement. Kia turned her head and looked to the right of his dormitory. Shimo followed the direction of his gaze and saw rabbit dolls the size of a hill stacked on top of the cart. At the visiting station, there are 2 dormitory teachers who look at Shimo with an awkward and polite smile. Lucia won't let us move, so she can only ask you. Hearing this, Shimo's mouth rose slightly and smiled.
It doesn't matter, the students should help each other.
Teacher Sugon seemed very satisfied with this answer, especially after seeing the family crest on Shimo's clothes. In that case, these dolls have forgotten to you. After all, the 2 turned around and left, so fast. If Shimo hadn't noticed the Reiatsu fluctuations, they suspected that they had used the Shunpo technique. Shimo walked towards the Munzi doll. Rukia followed closely behind him and said nothing. She had kept her head down since just now, and she didn't know what she was thinking. Shimo walked to the side of the cart before he noticed a very serious matter. Here, it seems to be next door to me. Rukia, is this what you asked for? Rukia, who has finally adjusted his mentality, broke his defense again because of this sentence. No, it's all arranged by the dormitory teacher. She proclaimed her position loudly. I just follow the teacher's arrangement. Shimo on the side nodded repeatedly. You were right. At this time, it's better not to refute Rukia, otherwise he is worried that this onion head will be sent to the 4th division due to hyperthermia. Shimo hugged the rabbit doll with a big grin, and suddenly his body stiffened. The fresh fragrance from the girl's body fills the nasal cavity. At this time, he knew why Rukia didn't let others help her move these rabbit dolls. Perhaps it stems from trust in a sense? Chapter 17 Kido Grandmaster, Seeking Data Support. Advertisement. Electricity is a spell that must be mastered in death sleeves. Teacher Kido standing on the podium looks more seductive than the previous teachers. However, Shimo didn't have much thoughts to observe the opponent's appearance. Acting, he just thinks about the time to complete his check-in task. Obviously, he is more attentive to Kido's study, in addition, because a certain girl sat beside him without permission. This also made Shimo more focused. Different Kido have their own mantra chants. The first step we need to learn is to write down these mantras. Teacher Kido is named Ryoko Asami and is a member of the Kido community. The Grandmaster has many kinds of Hado Bakudo and Kaido. According to her, she has been Teacher Kido in the Spiritual Academy for hundreds of years. As for why Rukia sat with Shimo and became a student in the special class. We have to start with the rotten aristocratic system of the Ling Court, so I won't mention it here for the time being. All in all, Shimo used his own power to transfer Rukia to a group. After discovering this, a certain red-haired young man appeared particularly excited. However, what happened next made him a little bit too slow. Rukia sat next to Kyōraku Shimo. Abarai Renji has difficulty accepting reality. What happened in these 2 days? One of Hado rushes. Reiatsu instilled to the tip of the index finger of his right hand, and the next moment the shockwave hit the wood on the training ground for the deaf. Smoke rises, and the entire wooden target is instantly wiped out. Asakami Ryoko didn't have any surprised expression. She silently recorded something in the notebook in her hand. When other students saw it, they tried it in a modest manner. However, among the many students, only a handful of them successfully performed it. Advertisement among them, the performance of a yellow-haired youth caught Shimo's attention. Kira Izuru. He kept it in his heart for the future deputy captain of the 3rd division. He has no interest in talking. Shimo, come with me. Asami Ryoko put away the notebook in her hand and walked to Shimo and said. Shimo doesn't know why, but he still followed the two walked to a relatively secluded corner of the training ground. Shimo, your performance is beyond my imagination. Asakami Ryoko has a decisive personality and does not have the feminine sense of weakness at all. Captain Kyōraku once asked me not to restrict your studies. So in the future, you can give full play to your talent. Shimo's eyes suddenly lit up and smiled. That product couldn't be better. Since then, Shimo's course schedule has been different from other students. In the Kendo class, after he tried slashing skills against Miyano Kaide, he was judged to be an excellent student with privileges.
The Shunko class is even more true. Shunko from Sakashita Seiki town is even inadequate compared to Shimo. What about teaching?
As for self-teaching, it's going on as usual. Shimo has never rejected these basic studies. Kyōraku Shunsui's instructions also have a lot of weight in the Spiritual Arts Academy. The time is also the best notice not only because of his status as a nobleman, but also because of his relationship with Kyōraku Shunsui.
Destroy yourself, the black dog of Rondanini, let it burn up completely after reading it, and cut your own throat.
Shimo stretched out his hand and pointed it at the test dummy. A red curse appeared on the palm of his palm, which contained a heavy Reiatsu. Advertisement. In the next moment, a red light appeared, bound to the dummy's body, and huge power was revealed on it, deeply squeezed into its skin. Squeaky, the sour voice came from the dummy, and then the dummy was broken into several pieces under the restraint of the red light. Upon seeing this, I saw that the corners of Ryoko's mouth twitched slightly, and he couldn't help holding his forehead.
Shimo. This is Bakuto, not Hado. The purpose of Bakuto is to bind and ban molybdenum targets, not to destroy them.
Shimo waved his hand and explained, weak targets do not need to be restrained by Bakuto. All you need is Reiatsu to incapacitate him. After Jigon was able to resist Reiatsu's oppression, I was qualified to use Bakuto. In this way, Bakuto will not cause devastating damage to it. Asakami Ryoko hesitated, and hesitated. This obviously, Shimo's fallacies have been fooled.
At this time, the system prompt sounded at the right time.
Check-in completed, task rewards are being issued.
Congratulations to host for getting the reward, Kido Grandmaster. Close black lens bracket.
A lot of Kido-related knowledge rushed into his mind at this moment.
Fortunately, Shimo's endurance has been greatly improved, and he can digest this knowledge completely.
Are all Kido masters before the 88th? Shimo digested all the Kido knowledge, and already had a certain amount of confidence in his heart. In addition, it seems that there are high-end skills such as anti-ghost killing, chanting and discarding. But Shimo didn't care how much his strength increased, but thought of another thing. In this way, the reason for entering the 4th division is even more sufficient. Chapter 18 Noble Gathering Place, Seeking Flowers for Support. Advertisement. Over the next period of time, Shimo continued to show his talent. Although it is only a trivial part, it is enough to prove that its strength has grown rapidly.
The Spiritual Arts Academy has a rule for early graduation. As long as you reach the level, you can apply for it.
Although it can save a lot of trouble because of the status of the superior nobility. But this does not mean that he has the privilege of being above the Spiritual Arts Academy. The process that should be followed still has to be walked. What's more, he still needs to stay in the Spiritual Arts Academy for 2 years. Dormitory number 1. Shimo sits on the dry futon with his knees closed, his eyes closed, his brows slightly furrowed, and his hands resting on the sealed state. In the Zanpakuto space, Shimo continued to climb with difficulty. Although his body was shaking uncontrollably, he still did not give up.
Shimo's eyes were firm, his veins violent, and tremblingly raised his steps again, stepping up and down a step.
The more terrifying oppressive force instantly enveloped it. In his current state, he couldn't resist at all, and he immediately left the Zanpakuto space.
Tick, tick, sweat dripped onto the dry floor with a crisp cracking sound.
After a short refurbishment, Shimo gradually returned to normal. It took 2 months to climb the 10 steps. His tone was full of chagrin. It seems that things are not as simple as I thought. Also, the new mission has not been released for a long time. Shimo looks at the words in the taskbar. The new check-in task has been released. Please check in at the Mao Spiritual Academy for 2 years and graduate as an outstanding student. Task reward. Zanpakuto Shikai's first ability, close black lens bracket. I thought that this check-in task would give him Shikai abilities, but after several tasks, Shimo feels that the task reward is not as simple as it seems. Advertisement. Perhaps, there is another meaning. Because Shimo had a hunch, when he climbed to a certain height in the Zanpakuto space, he would be able to know Zanpakuto's real name. And he has enough Reiatsu, which makes Shikai not difficult. So, what is the so-called first ability? For a while, Shimo was a little fanciful. After a moment, he shook his head. It is too early to think about this. Come slowly, you can't make a fat man in one bite. The restriction of appetite has resulted in only strengthening oneself little by little. It's just time to honor what I once said. In the dormitory next door, Shimo knocked on the door. Wow, the wooden door opened, and a black onion head protruded from it, looking around. Idiot Shimo, what are you doing? Rukia has a bad tone and seems to be sulking. Come to give you a present. Shimo didn't care. Rukia was in this state and couldn't get away from him. Because in the painting class a few days ago, he once again mocked his paintings, showing no mercy. Since then, Rukia has been sulking for several days. Although she was sitting next to Shimo in class as usual, the stubborn girl made up her mind not to say a word to Shimo for 3 days. And today, it seems to be the 4th day. Gift? Rukia stretched her brows and said curiously, "What gift?" Shimo opened the wooden door and pulled it out of the dormitory. "Follow me and you will know. Advertisement, take you to meet someone." Rukia's curiosity was as scratching as 100 claws, but after many inquiries, Shimo still insisted on keeping his tongue and refused to disclose it at all. Until, under her surprised gaze, the two of them walked straight out of the Spiritual Arts Academy. "Hello. Where are we going? You can't enter and exit Ziyang Spiritual Academy without the teacher's approval." Genkia wanted to pull Shimo back, however, its petite body is not enough to resist Shimo. "If you struggle again, I will carry you over." Hearing that, Rukia's body stiffened and seemed to think of some bad memories. Immediately afterwards, she was like a well-behaved cat, letting Shimo take her hand and walk towards the stagnant palace. Being carried by someone like this, if it spreads in Yulingting. Rukia shuddered. It was hard to imagine what happened after Shinigami. "You don't have to worry about the teacher's punishment." Shimo explained calmly, "I said hello before I came here."
Genkia nodded blankly. Until now, she still didn't understand what Shimo wanted to do.
What kind of gift is it that makes it possible to come to this wandering palace? As the surrounding buildings gradually become gorgeous, Rukia's heart becomes more and more disturbed. Several months of study has given Rukia a preliminary understanding of Yulingting and Soul Society.
According to the changes in the surrounding environment, she has recognized something. Ryudo Temple House, Jashiro House, B Family. This is the gathering place of the nobles of the Lingting Court.
Genkia exclaimed, "Are you going to take me to your family, Shimo?" Hearing this, Shimo's footsteps suddenly stopped. He touched his chin and thought carefully.
Looks like it's okay. Chapter 19 Byakuya Kuchiki, seeking a flower evaluation ticket.
Advertisement. Rukia knew Shimo's identity a long time ago. At the beginning of the product, she still had a little mind.
But over time, Rukia discovered that Shimo doesn't care about the so-called identity gap.
This made her gradually get used to this matter. But today, the first time I saw the gathering place of the nobles of the Stagnation Palace, it really surprised Rukia. "Shimo, stop joking." Rukia's voice lowered, "I'm just a commoner of Rukongai. Can't enter the noble house at will." Her mood became a little low. "It's Anne, don't think too much. We will not go to Kyōraku's house today." Shimo held Rukia's small backhand in his hand and continued to walk towards the depths. Until, I saw the appearance of the word Kuchiki. The appearance of Kuchiki's house is extremely gorgeous, with aristocratic style between bricks and tiles. "Ching Jing, it is luxurious," Shimo exclaimed, and walked straight forward. The guard Shinigami seems to know Shimo and didn't ask too much. "Let's go, Rukia." Shimo took Genkia's hand again and walked towards the interior of Kuchiki's house. In such a strange environment, Genkia is obviously a little uncomfortable. She looked left and right, a trace of undetectable fear flashed through her deep purple eyes. There is an unspeakable sense of depression in Kuchiki's family. "Shimo, let's go," Rukia whispered. Shimo rubbed Rukia's hair lightly and calmed down.
"Don't worry, I am here." Under the leadership of the servant, Shimo and Rukia came to the main hall.
Along the way, from time to time, Kuchiki people look at Rukia with a strange look.
Advertisement. But because of the strict rules of the Kuchiki family, no one came up to say hello at will.
Regarding this, Lin Kia felt even more nervous. Patriarch Binmu should be here soon. In the main hall, Shimo and Rukia waited quietly. The surrounding environment is extremely quiet. "Shimo, can you tell me?" Before Rukia finished speaking, Shimo interrupted him. "Speaking out, there will be no surprises." Shimo is tight-lipped. "But until now, I have only seen surprise, not the slightest joy." Time passes by until a white figure appeared at the entrance of the main hall.
Under the handsome appearance, he showed an extremely cold look.
The long hair that was raised slightly was worn by the upper-class nobles. There was a silver-white veil around the neck, and the inner was lined with a black death tyrant. The coat was white. The captain of Haori, dressed up to the fullest. Luxurious. Kuchiki Patriarch, Shimo, long time no see. Kuchiki's self-confident attitude towards Shimo is unexpectedly kind. Is she the sister of Feiji? Shimo Nunu's mouth, completely without the humility of facing the four nobles. Does this still need me to explain? You don't care about the rules of the so-called nobility, do you? After Byakuya Kuchiki dismissed the servants around him, Shimo seemed more relaxed. You should understand the responsibility of the Kuchiki family as the head of the four nobles. Maintaining the Soul Society. Byakuya Kuchiki tried to explain something to Shimo, but the listener became more and more impatient. All right. This topic ends here. I have heard your rhetoric more than 100 times. Advertisement. Shimo stretched out his hand, pressed it on the top of Rukia's head, and said loudly. What I mean by bringing Rukia here today is obvious enough. You should know who I am for. At this time, the conversation between the two had completely shocked Rukia. She was so shocked that she even ignored the big hand on top of her head. Her blank eyes patrolled back and forth between the two of them, completely unable to understand what was going on. Doesn't it mean that there is a strict hierarchy among the nobles? Shimo, is he a superior nobleman? Why did he talk to Patriarch Kuchiki, the head of the four nobles, in this tone? I entered a fake Kuchiki house. Also, who is Hijin? Seeing Shimo's stubborn and determined expression, Kuchiki seemed helpless, admitting. I didn't mean to accuse you, but before you come, at least you have to say hello, right? Suddenly, I said that I brought my sister Feijun, this. Shimo shook his head and sighed. A rotten man who is professed by old ideas, you should really learn from my stupid Ogi-san. Byakuya Kuchiki didn't know how to talk to him for a while. He regretted getting acquainted with Shimo now. I should have stayed away from you. Shimo smiled slightly and said, until now, you have owed me 39 love. I hope you can pay off in Shinigami's long life. Kuchiki sighed to himself, and cried out that he was not careful about making friends. Come with me, Feijun is resting now. With that said, he walked out of the main hall. Shimo pulls on Rukia, who is becoming more and more confused, and follows closely. In the end, what happened? Chapter 20 Sisters Meet, Seeking Flowers and Evaluation Votes. Advertisement. Shikai drew Rukia to the front and explained. In fact, you still have a sister living in the world. At the time of the present world, you died in the nude, and you came to Rukongai. But the living environment in Inazuri district is more clear than you than me.
It's impossible to survive with a baby in Sister Feijun's situation, so she abandons you.
Rukia listened to Shimo's explanation, and the expression on her face gradually changed from dazed to stunned, until her expression became low. It turns out that I also have relatives. Shimo Shenshin pressed the top of Sikia's head, choosing the blame to comfort him. Sister Feijun later met Byakuya Kuchiki in Rukongai, who was the dead Tsunere walking in front. At that time, Byakuya, regardless of the status of the noble son, resolutely married Feijun's sister. After settling down, she has been dedicated to finding your trace. But Sister Feiji's body is already weaker. Hearing this, Shimo felt Rukia's small hands suddenly exert force and touched his palms tightly. Why is this? Shimo folded his hands and held Rukia's hands in the heart. Sister Kazuna is frail and sickly. Every time she comes down, she will go to Rukongai to look for you, and she will become sick from overwork. So, the world did not abandon you. Rukia raised her head, a little gratitude flashed across her dark purple eyes. She understood that all of this was Shimo's mind.
Ahem. Byakuya Kuchiki, who was in front of the store, couldn't stand it anymore.
Don't let Lianzhen wait too long. Shimo glanced at the goods irritably. I think you have some opinions on me. Nothing. Kuchiki raised the corner of his mouth slightly, Haori raised lightly, stepping a little faster under his feet. Advertisement from beginning to end, he has maintained a calm demeanor. Shimo glared at Byakuya Kuchiki ferociously, then pulled on and Rukia followed closely. Kuchiki's house, other courtyard. Passing through several circular corridors, the scenery in the courtyard gradually changed. Pieces of sakura flowers blooming on the branches, fluttering in the wind from time to time, add a bit of tranquility to this unique landscape courtyard. Outside the quiet room, a woman in a light-colored kimono sat quietly under the eaves, looking at the soft water, not knowing what she was thinking. It looks like Rukia carved out of a mold. The only difference is the slightly drooping corners of the eyes and the gentle and introverted temperament. Practice true. At this moment, Byakuya's tone changed from indifferent to gentle.
However, this change can only be seen by the woman in front of her.
I brought you someone. Fei turned his head and looked at Shimo and Genkia. The moment his eyes touched her, her body suddenly froze. With tears in her eyes, her expression was like a broken and silent water surface, becoming extremely excited. Regardless of Byakuya Kuchiki's persuasion, Aizen stumblingly ran towards Rukia. Shimo also let go of Rukia's small hand in time and moved back. Before he could take a few steps, Byakuya Kuchiki took his shoulders. Give them some space. When the voice fell, Byakuya Kuchiki started shunpo with Shimo. The surge of Reiatsu forced Shimo to keep up, too. He cursed in a low voice, mobilizing Reiatsu in his body a lot. Noting Shimo's shunpo speed, Kuchiki's calm eyes flashed with surprise. Today people are unexpected. The two came to the yard next door and sat face to face in the pavilion. Advertisement, there are so many things you didn't expect. Shimo looked at this stuff contemptuously. Cold outside and hot inside, typical dead Tsunere. It took only a few months to enter the Ziyang Spiritual Art Academy, and it has increased so much strength. Karaki Byakuya looked at Shimo quietly, speaking flatly. Have you decided which team to enter? Shimo curled his lips. I won't enter the 6th and 8th squad anyway. Byakuya Kuchiki froze for a moment. Shimo's answer was a bit unexpected. Why? Shimo looked at the sky outside, a little unwilling in his calm tone. Crow needs to fight the sky to have strong wings. The 6th and 8th divisions are not suitable for me. Byakuya Kuchiki thought of a possibility. Do you want to enter the 11th division? According to Shimo, it seems that only the 11th squad as a combat squad is suitable for him. Shimo turned his head and looked at Byakuya Kuchiki, showing a sly smile. No recognition result. Mistaken, my choice is the 4th division. 2. Byakuya Kuchiki's blue veins throbbed, and Shimo once again disturbed his mind. Then what did you just mean? Shimo tapped the stone table lightly and made a bang. I wonder if you remember the greatest villain in the history of Soul Society? Chapter 21 Rukia's Thoughts, see Flower Evaluation Ticket for reward. Advertisement. Hearing that, Byakuya Kuchiki's pupils shrank abruptly and seemed to remember something bad. Why mention this suddenly? Shimo smiled, showing an expression that Byakuya Kuchiki couldn't understand. Besides challenging the captain, is there anything more exciting than spurring first-generation Kenpachi? Zanpakuto on Byakuya Kuchiki's waist makes a restlessness. Shimo's words shocked him a lot. After a long time, he recovered and looked at Shimo with a compassionate look. In return, I will help you collect the corpse. In addition, I will also take good care of Rukia. After all, that's Feijun's younger sister. If necessary, I can use the power of Patriarch Kuchiki to make her join the Kyōraku family. A black line appeared on Shimo's forehead and his face collapsed. Can't you look forward to something better? How to say I am a person who is kind to you? Byakuya Kuchiki shook his head, his expression became more sympathetic. A good word does not persuade the damned ghost, and the compassion is not to cross oneself. Some things are not something I can block. Shimo became angry for a while. He found it, and since Byakuya Kuchiki got acquainted with him, the dark belly of this guilty heart gradually revealed. In a sense, this was created by Shimo. Before that, Kuchiki wouldn't say such a thing. Well, now that you have made a decision, then I won't say much. Byakuya Kuchiki changed his tone and returned to the usual Zaji. But the door of the 6th division will always be open for you. Not only that, the position of deputy captain is reserved for you. After hearing this, Shimo's face finally turned from cloudy to fine. Advertisement. These are decent words. It's almost time. I should take Rukia to the spiritual academy. Shimo stood up, ready to go to the other courtyard. Kuchiki doesn't have any opinion on her own, just follow her. On the way, Shimo seemed to suddenly remember something. By the way, I suggest you do everything possible to save the life of Sister Wei Jin. At least drag it to the point where I can Shikai. Byakuya Kuchiki thought about it and asked, what's the meaning? It's about Kuchiki Hijin, his cold posture can't be maintained at all. Maybe I have the ability to save it completely. An inexplicable light flashed in Shimo's eyes, giving people a sense of trust. But, even the 4th division Byakuya Kuchiki looked awkward. If the 4th division doesn't work, go find the change division. If it doesn't work, I can also introduce you to a talent in this world. Shimo walked with him carelessly, relaxed between words. The person in this world must have a way. Byakuya Kuchiki nodded, keeping the words of the times in mind. When it comes to Kuchiki's life, he won't be sloppy. When I saw Rukia again, the girl's eyes were a little red and swollen, and Jiexayu's face was marked with tears. She seemed to have noticed Shimo's arrival. She hurriedly wiped the tears with her sleeves, trying to hide her fragile side. Kuchiki Fei Jenkang squeezed a smile on his face and said softly. Thank you, Shimo. In the future, whenever there is something I can help, be sure to be polite. Before Shimo could speak, Byakuya Kuchiki flashed past him with a very fast shunpo. You can take care of yourself and raise your body. Advertisement. Just leave the matter here to me. The emotional swings of great sadness and joy can easily cause physical damage to Kuchiki Feijun right now. Shimo and Rukia didn't bother anymore, but chose to leave silently. Go back on the road. Wujia, have you ever thought of joining the nobles? Shimo asked after considering it in his heart. What's the meaning? Rukia is a little dazed, with red eyes. Obviously he hasn't recovered from what happened just now. Always worrying about the relationship between Feiji's sister, Byakuya Kuchiki may let you join the Kuchiki family together. Although this is a bit of a breach of the rules, there are only 0 and countless times of this kind of thing. Shimo analyzed, with a beginning, it will definitely not stop there. Kuchiki's house? Rukia lowered her head, thinking hard. Shimo didn't interrupt Rukia's thinking, and the two of them walked quietly in the direction of Spiritual Arts Academy. When he was about to reach the gate of the Spiritual Arts Academy, Rukia suddenly raised his head and looked at Shimo. If I join Kuchiki's house, will I be separated from you? My thinking is to say, the Kuchiki family is the first of the 4 nobles after all. Yukia's tone was a little flustered. Shimo's figure is slightly low, and he looks at him. Don't worry, Patriarch Kuchiki still owes me dozens of love. Moreover, our Kyōraku family doesn't have as many bad rules as the Kuchiki family. Hearing this, Rukia's face blushed, and she hurriedly broke away from Shimo's hand and ran towards the gate of the Spiritual Academy. What does it have to do with the Kyōraku family? I just don't want to lose your friend, only... Shimo looked at the petite figure, and the corners of his mouth rose slightly. Chapter 22 The Soul Burial Test conducted in advance, seeking flowers. Advertisement Shimo, who solved a problem, devoted himself to learning even more. What needs to be learned in the Spiritual Arts Academy is nothing more than 4 basic skills. In addition to white hits, Shimo has the remaining 3 basic skills far beyond the normal shinigami teacher. This also leads to the privilege of doing a lot of things. His life has become extremely regular: sword zen, spiritual power training, white hits training, cultural studies, and a battle of wits with a certain tsundere girl. In this kind of desirable cattle work, time often flies quickly. If it weren't for the behavior of a certain dabai who ignored the rules of the spiritual academy and broke into the dormitory during his practice, perhaps Shimo would not have noticed that time flies so fast. Byakuya, why are you coming to the spiritual academy in such a hurry? Shimo looked at the eager Kuchiki in front of him, and he had a vague guess in his heart. He has always appeared in the image of an iceberg, and he has never shown anxious look in front of others. But the current Byakuya Kuchiki seems to have engraved the word anxiety between the eyebrows. Hijin's life is already very difficult to maintain. I need your help urgently now. Shimo frowned. Is there no way for the Zero team? Byakuya Kuchiki looked at him with a strange look and said solemnly. Why in your mouth? The Zero division is like a Chinese cabbage, can it be shot at will? Shimo gave a ha-ha and skipped the topic. It doesn't matter, the Zero division is just one of many choices. In addition, we can also find Kuratsuchi Mayuri, the captain of the 2nd Division and the current director of the Technology Development Bureau. Byakuya Kuchiki's face became darker, and his voice became deeper and deeper. Stop joking. Kuratsuchi Mayuri, I will never let him come into contact with Hijin. Shimo smashed his mouth and said helplessly, advertisement. Yes, that's a lunatic, it's hard to guarantee what he will do.
It seems that I can only give me the final plan.
Byakuya Kuchiki rubbed his fists tightly, his eyes eagerly. The so-called talent in this world. Yes, when other plans are not effective, you can only choose to go to this world. Shimo stood up and began to take away his own dormitory.
Byakuya Kuchiki lowered his head, thinking carefully about the pros and cons. After a long time, he suddenly raised his head. I will apply to the captain to go to this world.
What are you doing? Shimo tightened his abdominal belt and put the Kyōraku family crest on his right arm. Of course I am preparing to discover the world. Don't forget, I am an outstanding student of Spiritual Arts Academy. In a word, Byakuya Kuchiki's mind suddenly flashed through the relevant regulations of the Spiritual Arts Academy. Are you going to graduate early? Shimo nodded and said seriously. The Spiritual Arts Academy has nothing to teach me. Graduating early is also a good choice. Only in this way can I officially go to this world.
Students who graduate from the Spiritual Academy are required to undergo a soul burial assessment. This is the basic ability that every shinigami needs to be a master.
Only by passing the Hunping test can you officially graduate from the Spiritual Academy. Byakuya Kuchiki was silent, eyes drooping. After a long time, he sighed. Advertisement. In that case, I beg you. In fact, even if there is no such thing as Kuchiki Hijin, Shimo will choose to graduate early in the near future. In 2 years, it is said that the long is not long, and the short is not short.
For shinigami, this time is more like a short work cycle.
Shimo also spent nearly 2 years in this leisurely time. He looked at the taskbar of the system, his only time-long check-in task, still staying there quietly. It's time to complete this task. Shimo thought silently in his heart, already made up his mind. As for applying for an early soul burial assessment, under the decayed and outdated hierarchical system, is this also a problem? Byakuya Kuchiki left, walking away with heavy thoughts. Although he trusts Shimo very much, it doesn't mean that he will trust someone he doesn't know.
In this world, it is still unknown whether there is a cure for Feijun.
But now, I can only pin my hopes here a week later. Shimo left the first dormitory without saying hello to Rukia. Prior to this, Kuchiki Ziza submitted an early graduation application regarding Shimo to the leadership of the Spiritual Arts Academy. Why isn't Kyōraku Shunsui in charge? In this regard, Shimo is also very speechless, in the words of Kyōraku Shunsui himself. That's a small matter, just solve it yourself. Abandoning all tedious procedures, Byakuya Kuchiki's application seems to have played a great role. After all, there is still some gap between the superior nobles and the 4 great nobles. Shimo came to the gate of crossing on time, but saw an unexpected figure. The woman in front of her was dressed in a regular death tyrant, with her long black hair woven into one-sided bangs, and she wore delicate glasses on the bridge of her nose. Her intellectual face had a look of joy. Little Shimo, I didn't expect this soul burial internship to be in charge of me, right?
Chapter 23 Soul Burial, Seeking Flowers and Evaluation Votes.
Advertisement, Sister Naneo. There was a surprised expression on Shimo's face, looking very surprised. The visitor is no one else, but the deputy captain of the 8th Division, Naneo Eyes. Strictly speaking, Aizen Naneo is a cousin and brother. Unlike the complicated relationship of the Aizen family, Shimo's family was killed in an official job. But what surprised Shimo was Kyōraku Shunsui did not conceal everything in the Aizen Naneo family, but told her everything in detail after he became an adult. Afterwards, Aizen stayed low for a while, but he walked out of the shadows and greeted life again. And the 8 mirror sword symbolizing the curse is still hidden by Kyōraku Shunsui. In his words, that is, I will keep it safe before you have a real enlightenment. As for Aizen after entering the 8th division, she also appears to have a much more cheerful personality than before. As for the styling, it is a matter of personal hobbies. It is really surprising that he is willing to let you go to this world. Shimo returned to peace and said with a smile. Aizen tilted her head and smiled. It has nothing to do with Captain Kyōraku. I just heard that you applied for the soul burial test in advance, so I petitioned to go there. Which team to go? Have you thought about it? Aizen seems to be very confident in Shimo. The soul burial test or something does not make it difficult at all. Why do you always pay attention to the issue of the squad? Shimo blew the hair tress falling from the side and said helplessly. Didn't Captain Kyōraku tell you? I told him shortly after entering school. Aizen looked blank. The captain has never mentioned it to me. After all, you also know his daily work, advertisement. Hearing this, Shimo couldn't help covering his face. It's better to save him some face, don't talk about these things. It's really hard to have such an elder, my choice is the 4th division. Doubt appeared on Aizen face, and she was equally puzzled. But unlike the other 2 people who asked this question, her choice was to respect Shimo's choice. The senior students who are going to participate in the soul burial test are already ready before Shimo arrives. After Aizen explained some things that need to be noted, he announced the start of the test. Under the lead of the Hell Butterfly, Shimo entered the door through the world alone. According to Shimo's request, and the secret operation of Byakuya Kuchiki, the location of the soul burial test is set in a special city. Empty library stare. Despair. Shimo jumped down through the gate and officially came into the world. At this time in this world, the moonlight is thick. Under the shining of the moonlight, the Hell Butterfly danced and disappeared into the air. Shimo is condescending and clearly perceives multiple internships. Shinigami is moving towards Karakura town in all directions, ready to seize the opportunity to test. The soul burial matter can be set aside temporarily. You must find that man first. Shimo can still tell the difference between the seriousness of the matter.
The soul burial test is not a particularly troublesome thing, it only needs to send back 10 wandering souls in this world.
As for all the emptiness that may be encountered, he will not be concerned about it. Shimo presses his right hand on the scabbard, his mind is active. Straight name. I hope I can see your strength this time. Advertisement as early as half a month ago, when he climbed the time ladder, Shimo finally stepped onto the 100th ladder with his perseverance. And what he got was the real name of Zanpakuto, the power that comes from the depths of the soul. Shimo shuttled back and forth between the floors, searching for his goal of coming to the world this time. Because Karakura was staring at this for the first time, Shimo could only choose this clumsy way. However, in the meantime, he found several whole souls. Shimo didn't waste the opportunity to help them get relief. Touched by the hilt of the sealed state, these Lushun headed to Soul Society with Shimo's grateful gaze. This is Shinigami's responsibility and a way to maintain world stability. If there is no Shinigami's soul burial, these whole souls will wander in this world uneasy. Eventually, he was drawn by his own resentment, turned into a void, or swallowed by other voids. After experiencing several soul burials, Shimo's operations have become very familiar. Mouth Shimo shuttled between the roofs, and an unknown voice came from below. When Shiki looked intently, he found that he was just a godless eyes and a whole soul who had lost all hope. His beard is stubborn, and his whole middle-aged decadent uncle walks aimlessly on the street. For this kind of whole soul, Shimo has always been to ensure efficient action execution. He disappeared in the air as a shunpo, and appeared in front of him the next moment. Before he could speak, the hilt of the sealed state had already been pressed on his forehead.
A faint white light appeared, and a soul character was engraved on his forehead.
Immediately afterwards, the uncle was sent to Soul Society. At this moment, Shimo's ears rang a familiar voice that had been gone for a long time. Ding! The new check-in task is released. Please check in at the Puyuen store and liberate Zanpakuto. Close black lens bracket. Task reward. White hits Grandmaster. Chapter 24 check-in location, Urahara store, please sneeze. Advertisement. A hint of joy appeared on Shimo's face. Finally, a new check-in task has been released. Shimo has not triggered a new task since completing the check-in in the Kido class. This has also led to his ability to increase his strength only through his own continuous practice. Fortunately, its own talent is very good, and there is no step of stagnation and increase in strength. Don't ask for this task. Shimo stared at the taskbar, lost in thought. Do I need to perform Shikai at the Urahara store? It seems to be a rude thing, but he quickly relieved, everything is to become stronger. Shimo continues to focus on finding the Urahara store. If he encounters a whole soul on the road, he will help him to bury his soul. Floating in this world is not a good thing for anyone. The location of the Urahara store, Shimo only had a vague impression in his mind. It's not easy to find the location of Urahara store based on this impression alone. What's more, Urahara Kazuki has hidden barriers for the safety of himself and those around him. In this way, it is more difficult to find them. It seems that I can only rely on other powers. Shimo let go of perception and caught the spirit flowing in the air. At 7 o'clock, there seems to be a battle between Shinigami and Shu. The moment the voice fell, his whole person had disappeared in place. It's the force surging. Stunned, Shimo continued to rush to the place where the battle took place. When I was approaching, I found out that the situation of the battle was actually showing a one-sided trend. The senior students of the Spiritual Academy are really terrible. The opponent in front of him is a phantom like a giant orangutan. A huge hole appeared on his chest, and his sturdy arms waved in the air with extreme speed, setting off a violent wave of air. Advertisement. As for the upper grades, due to lack of strength, they just relied on the pace of their steps to barely deal with them. From Shimo's point of view, the level of this senior student is really limited. The extremely simple cutting technique, shunpo like a turtle crawling. It has to be said that it is a miracle to be able to persist under the attack of Dexia Shu until now. This senior, does he need combat assistance? Unlike Kyōraku Shunsui's bad character, he often intervenes in other people's battles. Shimo is more accustomed to respecting teammates or opponents when fighting. When the senior cow heard the voice of others, he was overjoyed and hurriedly said, please don't keep your hands, thank you very much." Shimo raised his brows, but he didn't expect the other party to be very polite. "I'm almost hammered to death, and I don't forget to say thank you." For this kind of people, Shimo has always been willing to help. The 9 strikes of Bakudo. Shimo stretched out his hand, and the red spell was engraved on his palm. A large amount of spiritual power gathered here, and as its voice fell, the curse culture flew away as a beam of light to the deceptive place. Faced with Bakudo's attack, he was so imaginary that he didn't pay attention to it. It lifted its palm the size of a grinding disc and fanned it towards the red beam. "I'll leave it to me for the time being." Shimo's tone was calm, and he walked towards the senior student. "You can seek help from the Ai's deputy captain." The words were not finished yet. The red light beam dodged the attack of the orangutan from a strange angle, and went straight to its thick throat. Roar. A roar of fear came out of his mouth, and the gorilla furiously scratched his neck, trying to get rid of the restraint. However, all of this is useless. The first time the seniors saw Shimo, they recognized him. No way. The noble symbol of the Kyōraku family is still very conspicuous. Advertisement. According to legend, the outstanding student in front of him has a deep relationship with the Captain Kyōraku of the 8th Division. Thinking of this, it seems that there is no need to entangle the gap in strength between each other. Thanks a lot. The senior students thanked again and left the battlefield quickly. Shimo noticed the distance of his Reiatsu, nodded, and then looked at the struggling Dexu with satisfaction. The first helper. Seeing Shimo approaching, there is a bad premonition in the ape's heart. "I need you to help me find a shop." Shimo described the characteristics of the Urahara store, and then said, "The Bakudo mantra on the neck will be unlocked when you find this shop. Do you understand?" There is no emotional fluctuation in the calm tone. He was full of horror and looked at Shinigami in front of him, as if he was looking at the devil from hell. After hearing Shimo's narration, he nodded repeatedly. The bondage on the neck poses a threat to his life. Shimo waved, motioned. "Go, I can sense where the spell is. After you find the shop, you just need to stay where you are." The gorilla flees here in a panic gesture. A helper is not enough. Shimo continues to look for traces of the imaginary. Compared to the Urahara shop, these imaginary is much easier to find. He used multiple helpers in the same way, and his efficiency was greatly increased at a time. Shimo sat cross-legged on a tall building, sensing the response from the spell. Time goes by constantly. Shimo's mouth rose slightly after he realized that multiple spells had disappeared in the same place. "I found you, Urahara Kazuki." Chapter 25. Meet Urahara Kazuki, seeking flowers evaluation ticket for reward. Advertisement. According to the location where the spell last disappeared, Shimo mobilized Shunpo to rush towards that side. He looks attentive, always paying attention to the changes around him. After a few minutes, Shimo raised his brows slightly and noticed the strangeness around him. The concentration of other children in this area is higher than other places in Karakura town. Although Karakura town has a heavy spiritual land within a spiritual radius, the area in front of you is obviously abnormal. And where the ice spell disappears, there is not far in front. At this time, in the Urahara store, a man dressed in a green haori, a green fisherman's hat, and a little bit of hookah on his chin stood in the courtyard. His brows were furrowed, and a hint of enlightenment flashed in his eyes. At this moment, a burly middle-aged man with reflective glasses walked in outside the shop. "Manager, the emptiness outside has been resolved." "Why do so many false eyes suddenly appear today?" Urahara Kazuki raised his head, his eyes a little deep. "Used by someone. With his mind, it's easy to figure out why." "Is there anything happening over Yuyuting today?" Tessai mused. Kido. The students of Spiritual Arts Academy took the soul burial test and chose Karakura town. Shimo moved deeper into this area, and gradually affirmed his guess. High-level Kido enchantment. he found something different from his surroundings. Before he could go deeper, he sensed that Reiatsu appeared on the roof not far away. He looked sideways, but saw a person standing on a crutches holding a cane. The image of the antler is the same as the store manager Urahara in Shimo's impression. The unfathomable Reiatsu has already explained his identity. Oh, I didn't expect an intern to find it here. Urahara Kazuki has a relaxed speech and a very calm expression. I don't know what you are doing here, Shimo laughed. Naturally, there are things that need Mr. Urahara's help. As soon as this remark came out, it was a bit beyond Urahara Kazuki's expectation. He jumped down from the roof, walked to Shimo, and looked up and down at the young man in front of him. The sign of Kyōraku's house. There was a trace of puzzlement in Army Green's eyes. Urahara Kazuki did not expect that the intern of the spiritual academy was actually a member of the superior nobles. Advertisement. Shimo gave a humble smile and said, "Introduce yourself, under Kyōraku Shimo, a second-year student in Lingshu Academy." As soon as this remark came out, the look of surprise on Urahara Kazuki's face became more apparent. Does the second grade come to participate in the soul burial test? It's really awesome. Urahara Chazu slightly pressed his fisherman hat, his eyes were a little dangerous. So, Kyōraku Shimo, you searched for me so hard, do you want to ask you Lingting for credit? High-level Kido enchantment, he found something different from his surroundings. Before he could go deeper, he sensed that Reiatsu appeared on the roof not far away. He looked sideways, but saw a person standing on a crutches holding a cane. The image of the antler is the same as the store manager Urahara in Shimo's impression. The unfathomable Reiatsu has already explained his identity. Oh, I didn't expect an intern to find it here. Urahara Kazuki has a relaxed speech and a very calm expression. I don't know what you are doing here, Shimo laughed. Naturally, there are things that need Mr. Urahara's help. As soon as this remark came out, it was a bit beyond Urahara Kazuki's expectation. He jumped down from the roof, walked to Shimo, and looked up and down at the young man in front of him. The sign of Kyōraku's house. There was a trace of puzzlement in Army Green's eyes. Urahara Kazuki did not expect that the intern of the spiritual academy was actually a member of the superior nobles. Shimo gave a humble smile and said, "Introduce yourself, under Kyōraku Shimo, a second-year student in Lingshu Academy." As soon as this remark came out, the look of surprise on Urahara Kazuki's face became more apparent. Does the second grade come to participate in the soul burial test? It's really awesome. Urahara Chazu slightly pressed his fisherman hat, his eyes were a little dangerous. So, Kyōraku Shimo, you searched for me so hard, do you want to ask you Lingting for credit? Shi-Pa was stunned for a while and then I came to discuss it. Mr. Urahara joked, I'm here this time to seek your help. Advertisement. Urahara Kazuki did not believe Shihei just because of a simple statement or two. On the contrary, he still has a strong sense of vigilance towards the strange intern Shinigami. If it were not for the identity of the other party, he might have already started to leave Shimo forever. After all, the disappearance of the nobles is not a trivial matter. Especially during the soul burial test, to show my sincerity. Shimo seems to have anticipated this situation a long time ago. I can lure you some information about Aizen Moyasuke. The name seems to have some magic power. At the moment Shimo said it, Urahara Kazuki suddenly retracted the smile on his face, and his expression became a bit solemn. His Qianzhong's fisherman's hat is pressed lower, making it difficult for people to see the changes in his gaze. It seems that you know more than I thought. Shi took a step forward, and the captain-level member Yachting released unreservedly. A huge sense of pressure is maintained in this space. A hint of surprise flashed in Urahara Kazuki's eyes. One after another unexpected events appeared, giving him the illusion that reality was out of control.
Reiatsu is fleeting, Shimo just wants to prove his strength.
So as not to rush to the other party without knowing it. Mr. Urahara, can you sit down and have a chat now? After a while, he took a step and returned to that calm look. The color of thinking flashed in Urahara Kazuki's eyes, and immediately showed a kind smile, and said seriously. I was worrying too much. Please, guest. Shimo followed Urahara Kazuki, and when he was approaching his shop, he pulled out Zanpakuto hidden in his crutch. Chatter. With a clear sound of drawing swords, Urahara Kazuki shook hands with Hongji, and pointed it on the Kido enchantment. After passing through the barrier, Shimo finally entered the Puyuen store.
Tessai looked at the young man in front of him warily, as if ready to sing Kido at any time. This is a guest, Kyōraku Shimo. Urahara Kazuki said, don't be too nervous.
Shimo sat cross-legged on the tatami at Urahara Kazuki's sign.
Well, young intern Shinigami. We should talk about your purpose.
Urahara Kazuki sat across from the tea table, looking at Shimo very seriously. Chapter 26. Reach a cooperation, please give me a reward. Advertisement. I have to say that Urahara Kazuki's eyes are still extremely oppressive. Shimo can feel the oppression like an abyss when he looks at him. This kind of feeling, he has only felt it on Aizen Kuyusuke's body.
Of course, it does not refer to strength. Save people.
Shimo's expression is affirmative, there is no hesitation between the words. Urahara Kazuki raised his brows and picked up the teapot to fill Shimo's cups. Saving people or something, shouldn't you go to the 4th division? I don't know anything about medical treatment, Shimo's forehead explained. To be precise, it's not about saving people, but about saving a flowing soul on the verge of disappearing. Urahara Kazuki held his teacup with both hands and waited for the following. The name is Kuchiki Hijin, who is the owner of the contemporary Kuchiki family, Kuchiki's wife. At this point, Shimo paused, noticing the look of surprise in Urahara Kazuki's eyes. Because my body is weak and sick, and overworked, Kuchiki is already weak to ultimate. Even the captain of the 4th division, there is nothing to do about it. He briefly introduced the situation of Kuchiki, waiting for Urahara Kazuki's answer. After Shimo finished speaking, Urahara Kazuki took off his fisherman hat and fell into contemplation. After a while, he raised his own question. Help you, what can I gain? As if he had already guessed that Urahara Kazuki would ask this question, he didn't hesitate to Kido. The friendship between the Kuchiki family and the Kyōraku family, and information about Aizen Kuyusuke. Hearing Shimo's answer, Urahara Kazuki's face gradually smiled. Since your excellency is full of sincerity, then I can't refuse. Perhaps Urahara Kazuki can choose to ignore the previous condition. Advertisement, however, Aizen's related information, he must obtain. From Shimo's verbal expressions, Urahara Kazuki concluded that the other party must know something inside. Without noticing that the opponent was hostile, he chose to believe Shimo. Urahara is first bull, you made the right decision. Shimo raised his teacup, took a sip, and immediately frowned. The tea tasted strangely, as if it had been in dust for several years. Suddenly he remembered that his predecessor, Kido, had gripped Tessai's evil taste, and then carefully put down the teacup. Don't touch it for now. I can tell you about Aizen in advance. I hope Mr. Urahara can treat the patient with all his strength by then. Shimo believes in Urahara Kazuki's personality. Urahara Kazuki nodded and agreed. Then, Mr. Urahara, do you know anything about Aizen's Zanpakuto? This question caused a strange look on Urahara Kazuki's face. He has not concealed his Zanpakuto's ability, many shinigami know it. The flowing water system Zanpakuto can disturb the enemy and even kill each other through the reflection of fog and water. What Urahara Kazuki knew was no different from what Shimo had guessed. This is just a disguise. The true ability of Kyōraku Suigetsu is actually complete hypnosis. Shikai's expression is a bit heavy. People who have seen Shikai will be dominated by all 5 senses. Everything you see and feel is under Aizen's control. Urahara Kazuki held the teacup tightly, expressing his inner restlessness. Kyōraku Suigetsu can be said to be the strongest Zanpakuto in the illusion system, but anyone who has seen its liberation. Shimo shook his head regretfully. He will be completely hypnosis and fall into his control.
This is also the reason why Aizen showed himself Shikai in front of the Gote players.
Urahara Kazuki lowered his head and looked at the teacup in his hand. Advertisement: the tea is rippling, and his mood can't be calm at this moment. After a long time, he seemed to have accepted all this and said calmly. So, how do you know all this? With Aizen's character, it is impossible to tell other people. For this question, Shimo is already ready to answer. Everyone has his own secret. I am so, and so are you, Mr. Urahara. Urahara Kazuki shook his head and laughed, and said. What secrets can I have? It's just a crime. Shimo tapped the tabletop, leaning forward slightly, and said softly.
False, noodles. Urahara Kazuki was silent. There was silence in the room.
Shimo broke the silence. Mr. Urahara, I believe you have your own judgment. For cooperation with each other, you should have a correct decision. Speaking of which, Urahara Kazuki raised his head and said with a smile on the face. It seems that everything is in your master. Shimo waved his hand repeatedly, denying. I just used the asymmetry of information. When it comes to brains or something, I can't compare to you. In Urahara Kazuki's view, Shimo is nothing but a humble performance. With his wisdom, he can tell that every word Shimo has said since then is the truth. This is one of the reasons Urahara Kazuki is willing to trust Shimo. In that case, happy cooperation. Chapter 27 Shimo's Liberation, please support. Advertisement solved the purpose of coming this time. Then the new problem reappeared. Shimo furrowed his brows and looked at the teacup on the table, lost in thought. How can I be liberated in the Urahara store? It's not easy to solve the problem. If the random operation causes a wave of favorability to 0, then it's a bit of a break. It looks like, to find a suitable excuse. Shimo looked at Urahara Kazuki's leaving back, thinking very seriously. Urahara Kazuki needs to prepare for the treatment of Kuchiki Hijin. Because of its spiritual power, the ordinary flow soul is very suitable for Shinigami's treatment, but it is not suitable for them. What Urahara Kazuki needs to do is to transform Kido in a specific way until it is suitable for weak Ryu souls. Things that seem simple are extremely energy intensive. Not only that, but with the help of Tessai, it is possible to achieve. The predecessor Kido's accomplishments on Kido are still worthy of recognition. Under the leadership of Urahara Kazuki, he came to the hidden underground space of the Puyuen store. The vast area contains many uses of Kido. It has to be said that the other party has spent a lot of thought to build this area. Shimo-kun, I think as a doctor, it is necessary to meet with patients. After many attempts, Urahara Kazuki said with a solemn expression. Before seeing Kuchiki Hijin, he couldn't guarantee that he would have sufficient confidence to heal the other person.
Shimo pondered for a moment, then agreed. No problem, we will come to the shop through the Kuchiki's gate. If you don't ask me, you still need Mr. Urahara to do me a favor.
Urahara Kazuki pressed the crutches and laughed.
Shimo-kun, please say yes. Shimo jumped down from the boulder like a hill, and said calmly.
Because I have just liberated Zanpakuto from the master not long ago, I don't know what my strength is now. So, I hope Mr. Urahara can compare with me, so that I can have an idea in my mind. Hearing Shimo's words, Urahara Kazuki frowned slightly and immediately stretched out. Haha, of course. This little thing, it's easy. The two looked at each other and the atmosphere gradually solidified. Advertisement Shimo slowly withdrew his Zanpakuto from his waist, pointed the knife down, and faced Urahara Kazuki squarely. How about warming up before liberation? Urahara Kazuki kept his smile unchanged. Kido. Okay, it just so happens to let me see the genius of the spiritual academy now. What level is it? Wake up, Hongji. Seeing him clenching the crutches with one hand, Reiatsu released. The crutch in his hand burst out with dazzling white light, and all the camouflage entwined on it disappeared. Hongji appeared in front of Shimo again as Zanpakuto of Urahara Kazuki. Hongheim, like her master, hides her abilities under her unpretentious appearance. The plain double-edged crutch knife was replaced with a red knot where it should have a guard, and the hilt has a slight bend at the tail. Shimo's expression was serious, and he whispered in a low voice. Now that Urahara Shanyu is ready, then I'm welcome. The moment the voice fell, he has already started stunned to eliminate the bull and stayed in place. The surrounding air did not even cause any fluctuations. Upon seeing this, Urahara Kazuki shuddered and put away some contempt. With this stunned remonstrance earlier, Shihei was no longer defeated by most of the captains. Perhaps only Yoruichi can do it. Urahara Kazuki flipped his wrist and suddenly raised his arm to face the open space in front of him. The sound of gold and iron intertwined reverberating in the underground space. Secret sword. Shishui. Zanpakuto staggered past, Shimo's figure protruding forward, his slashing technique fell from the sky like dense snow. The cascading sword light turns into snowflakes in the sky, and every beautiful snowflake hides endless murderous intent. God dreams of a sword flow. In a short period of time, Shimo brought his Kendo talent to ultimate. The two Kendo genres of the master are all converted to what they have learned, and some improvements have been made to them. Urahara Kazuki has a serious face, and takes out his most focused posture to deal with the murderous intent that comes. For a time, the sword light circulated, flooding the underground space. Advertisement after Shimo realized Urahara Kazuki's level of strength, he no longer kept his hands. Before being officially liberated, it is not easy to hurt the opponent. In any case, Urahara Kazuki was once the captain of the squad, and the existence of the nest of sister insects can be suppressed by playing alone. Zanpakuto are constantly intertwined with each other. The seemingly unwavering competition, but it is very dangerous. Even if it is a little bit of sword light that occasionally leaks out of the battle, it can still leave unfathomable ravines on the solid ground. For a time, the scene was in a mess. It seems that going on like this will not be able to force your liberation. Urahara Kazuki Shunpo reached the distance, clasped Hongji with one hand, and smiled. I have to be more serious. Cry, Hongji. On the slender blade, the red xenon chlorine glows. Razor Hongji. I saw Urahara Kazuki holding the red jade and slashing it out from bottom to top. Reiatsu turned into a crescent-like red blade and headed straight to Shimo with the momentum of breaking through the sky. Leader Shimo smiled slightly and said, that's right. Secret Sword Yan returns. The sword pressure on Zanpakuto turned into a fleeting swift in the air, screaming fiercely, hitting the red blade directly. Boom. The terrifying Reiatsu collided and unfolded in the air, forming a violent shockwave that swept the entire underground space. Allah, what a terrible opponent. Urahara Kazuki backhanded his sword tail against his chest, and Reiatsu released, forming a bloody shield to block the shockwave. Let's put it in comprehensive caving, Hongji. He did not dissolve the blood and snow shield, but used the third kind of liberation. The words fell, and on the crimson bloody shield, countless light arrows went straight to Shimo. Faced with an attack that covered the sky, Shimo didn't panic at all. I can finally try my liberation. Time stop, Akatsuki. Chapter 28 Knife Name Hoof, seeking a flower evaluation vote. Advertisement. The voice fell, and suddenly, the terrifying Reiatsu swept the entire underground space. With Shimo as the center, the weird, nihility-like power instantly diverged. The red light arrow shot from the shield of the blood cloud was less than half an inch away from Shimo at this time. But they stopped in midair, as if the pause button was pressed. The moment Urahara Kazuki sensed this power, an expression of horror appeared on his calm face for the first time. How can, before the words were finished, the time in the entire underground space had already been stopped? At this moment, Zanpakuto in Shimo's hands has changed. Void-like twisting power lingers on the transparent blade, and the blade becomes extremely long, a bit similar to the 7 Days and 7 Swords, and the body glows with blood-red light. The handle of the knife turned black, exuding unidentified energy. The original metal-like blade has been transformed into a twisted clock, on which the hour and second hand is still walking. Shimo, who successfully displayed Shikai, looked at Zanpakuto in his hand with great satisfaction. Although I haven't been able to fully Shikai, it is already very gratifying.
Zanpakuto's real name is Sniff. It is the breaking of dawn and the twilight, both of which represent the meaning of time.
This is also very consistent with Zanpakuto's ability. After Shikai, Shimo can pause the time centered on it for 3 seconds according to the strength of his Reiatsu. A seemingly short period of time can often determine the direction of the battle. The captain-level duel of the strong, within 3 seconds, has been able to decide a lot of things. The more powerful it is, the more restrictive it is. The stronger the object stopped by time, the earlier it can break free of control. Just like Urahara Kazuki in front of me, Shimo cast Shunpo and just stopped in front of it. This hidden store manager has broken free from the shackles of time. Looking at Shimo who suddenly appeared in front of him, Urahara Kazuki couldn't help but smile wryly. Advertisement. This power. No wonder you didn't choose to perform Shikai in the Lingting. If such power is not well controlled, it will inevitably cause great panic. Time to disappear? The stagnant Soul Society? Suddenly, Urahara Kazuki's brain was open, and he came up with a number of Soul Society myths. At the same time, he also understood Shimo's thoughts. The purpose of the two should be the same, both are to hide their own strength. Shimo dismissed Shikai, and the chick in his hand returned to the original sealed state, and was inserted back into the scabbard. Shikai in Jingling Palace will inevitably cause unnecessary attention. Shimo shrugged and said helplessly, I don't want to be a target. Upon hearing this, Urahara Kazuki was taken aback. The choice of that team, 4th Division. Shimo showed a neat row of white teeth and smiled. I've already thought about this. Seeing him like this, Urahara Kazuki stopped saying anything. Because of the delay in the Puyuen store, Shimo almost failed to complete the soul burial test. Fortunately, Urahara Kazuki helped him find several whole souls before Shimo ended the test. In addition, after completing Shikai, the check-in task is also officially completed. Shimo's white hits level seems to have improved rapidly. Maybe it can't be compared with Shinigami who specializes in white hits captain, but at least he has the level of a regular captain. Under the leadership of Aizen and Neo, Shimo and other intern Shinigami returned to Yulingi again. After the soul burial internship is over, he can directly apply for graduation to the hospital. But before that, there are more important things to do. Kuchiki House advertisement. The nobles exclusively pass through the front door. Kuchiki looked at the two people in front of him nervously and exhorted. Shimo, everything is up to you. Kun Bing-mu faced straight in front of him. Bikuya Kuchiki's cold look in the past didn't know he threw it to the special horn speaker. Don't worry, Shimo patted his chest and agreed. Then he took Kuchiki and walked towards the gate of crossing. After a few days, Shimo came to the Puyuen store again. And Kuchiki's condition is getting worse and worse.
Mr. Urahara, what's the situation? Shimo asked.
Urahara Kazuki said with a heavy expression, analyzing one. The situation is not optimistic. Miss Fei Jin's body is already very weak and needs certain medicines to stabilize it. In addition, during treatment, I need Shimo-kun's help. Shimo was a little confused, but my Kaido skills. Before he finished speaking, he was interrupted by Urahara Kazuki. It's not that you need Kaido, it's Shikai. I need a second to pause. Soon Urahara Kazuki told Shimo about the treatment method. This is the soul stabilizing pill I invented. It can stabilize the state of flowing soul. But the method of use is extremely dangerous, and it needs to be put into the depths of the soul. Ms. Fei Jin's condition is already extremely bad. If the operation is forced to use surgery, it will inevitably cause more serious consequences. Shimo thoughtfully. So you want to use my Shikai for soul fixation? Chapter 29 Graduation. Seeking Flowers Evaluation Ticket. Advertisement. Urahara Kazuki nodded, and then led Shimo to the underground space again. In just a few days, it was restored to its original state again. Kuchiki Hijin is suspended in the air, protected by a special spiritual device. Urahara Kazuki took the prepared soul stabilization pill from his pocket and delivered it to Shimo's hand. I will perform 1,000 operations at an extremely fast speed. The moment you open the astral cavity, Shimo-kun, you just need to throw it in.
Shimo nodded, making no suggestions. This aspect is not what he is good at. Industry specializing in surgery. He didn't want to make Kuchiki Feijun die here because of a certain suggestion or a certain sentence of his own.
If this happens, the consequences will be extremely serious.
Affirmed by Shimo, Urahara Kazuki stood in front of Kuchiki Hyjin and officially started the operation.
A large number of lingza gathered into a thread-like substance, flying in the air. Suddenly, a void was dissolved in Kuchiki's abdominal cavity, like a void. Shimo-kun. Urahara Kazuki shouted hurriedly with a nervous expression. Time stop, Akatsuki. Shimo did not delay. At the moment when the void appeared, Shikai was directly activated. Under his control, the stop effect only covers a radius of 10 meters. Shimo took out the soul stabilization pill and flicked his finger to make it sink into the hollow. Within the scope of the time stop, the moon is a thing attached to the timer Reiatsu. You can decide whether to be affected by the time stop according to your heart. After 3 seconds, the stop is released. The soul stability pill also played its role at this moment. I saw the cavity in the abdominal cavity of Kuchiki Feijun, and there was a constant flow of spirits visible to the naked eye, repairing the cavity, but also stabilizing its soul touch. Upon seeing this scene, Urahara Kazuki let out a long sigh. Oh, it's really exhausting this time. When the task is completed, his tone has become a lot more relaxed and humorous. Prior to this, Urahara Kazuki was also under the tremendous pressure in his heart. If Kuchiki Feijun has an accident with him, then he will be greeted by a new life in exile. Not only that, it may even affect the visored hidden in the world. Advertisement Urahara Kazuki bears the fate of many people, and the pressure can be imagined. The stability of the soul continued, and Kuchiki was out of danger. Seeing his constantly moving nose, it seems Ping will soon wake up from his drowsiness. Thank you, Mr. Urahara. Shimo is a very polite person. Urahara Kazuki waved his hand, not knowing where he took out a small white folding fan, and fanned it back and forth. Yes, it should. It's getting late, shall I send you back? Compared to the present world, the Kuchiki family is more suitable for Miss Hijin's cultivation. This is a clear departure. Shimo is not a person who can't leave, there is nothing he misses in the present world. Except for Urahara Kazuki and other wanted criminals, there are no other people. Saying goodbye to Urahara's investigation, Shimo took Kuchiki to open the door to the Soul Society and returned to Soul Society. Back to Soul Society again, the place where Shimo took Kuchiki Hijin to appear is still Kuchiki's home. Privileges that only nobles can have. In fact, opening the door to pass without authorization is already a violation of the rules of the family. But as Shimo said, there are only 0 and countless times of this kind of thing. Byakuya Kuchiki, this guy, when he broke the rules for Kuchiki Hijin for the first time, he has become the latter. When Shimo came out of the gate, he saw Byakuya Kuchiki waiting anxiously at the door. Don't worry about it. Shimo smiled and said, Sister Wei Jin's situation has completely stabilized. Although the body still has some weakness, but there is no need to worry about life safety. Hearing that, Kuchiki breathed a sigh of relief. Thank you, Shimo. Kuchiki didn't ask much about the treatment process and even the treatment of the Feijun people. Suspiciously there was a vague guess in his heart, but he didn't say anything about Jingxi. The other party is gracious to him. Byakuya Kuchiki is willing to bet on everything he has to give back to the other party. Just need a suitable opportunity. The problem of Kuchiki's training has been solved, and a new event should be on the agenda. Shimo returned to the Spiritual Arts Academy and directly submitted an application for early graduation. Advertisement in this regard, the hospital's senior management did not have any surprises, and completed all the formalities as quickly as possible. When all the certificates are delivered to Shimo, he also officially changed from a spiritual school student to a formal shinigami. Check-in is completed, task rewards are being issued. Saying goodbye to Urahara's investigation, Shimo took Kuchiki to open the door to the Soul Society and returned to Soul Society. Back to Soul Society again, the place where Shimo took Kuchiki Hijin to appear is still Kuchiki's home. Privileges that only nobles can have. In fact, opening the door to pass without authorization is already a violation of the rules of the family. But as Shimo said, there are only 0 and countless times of this kind of thing. Byakuya Kuchiki, this guy, when he broke the rules for Kuchiki Hijin for the first time, he has become the latter. When Shimo came out of the gate, he saw Byakuya Kuchiki waiting anxiously at the door. Don't worry about it. Shimo smiled and said, Sister Wei Jin's situation has completely stabilized. Although the body still has some weakness, but there is no need to worry about life safety. Hearing that, Kuchiki breathed a sigh of relief. Thank you, Shimo. Kuchiki didn't ask much about the treatment process and even the treatment of the Feijun people. Suspiciously there was a vague guess in his heart, but he didn't say anything about Jingxi.
The other party is gracious to him. Byakuya Kuchiki is willing to bet on everything he has to give back to the other party.
Just need a suitable opportunity. The problem of Kuchiki's training has been solved, and a new event should be on the agenda. Shimo returned to the Spiritual Arts Academy and directly submitted an application for early graduation. In this regard, the hospital's senior management did not have any surprises, and completed all the formalities as quickly as possible. When all the certificates are delivered to Shimo, he also officially changed from a spiritual school student to a formal shinigami. Check-in is completed, task rewards are being issued. Congratulations to host for acquiring Shikai's first ability in Hoof Eyes. The space is stagnant. Chapter 30 Rabbit Shabby, seeking flowers for evaluation votes for support. Advertisement. As soon as he heard the system prompt, Shimo's black pupils shrank suddenly. Space stagnation? Isn't rare time Zanpakuto? But soon, his question was answered systematically. The first ability of Shikai refers to the ability outside the time system. Host cherish every additional ability. Close black lens bracket. In this regard, Shimo naturally accepted it calmly. Just listening to the name is the source of this ability. But the moon is the ability to involve changes in space, and both are very powerful abilities. Shimo drew Zanpakuto from the scabbard and tried to use this ability. He is now able to control the stop range after Shikai well. Time stop, sniff. Maintaining time within the dormitory ceased and ended soon.
Shikai tried space stagnation for the first time.
The tip of Zanpakuto's knife imaginarily pointed forward, and Reiatsu, which instantly poured out, covered the entire dormitory. For a time, with Shimo as the center, the space within 10 meters of up, down, left, and right was completely frozen. Different from the time stop, the consumption of space stagnation is small, and the duration of the effect can be determined based on the remaining Reiatsu.
But relatively speaking, its power has no time to stop being strong.
In the stagnant space, this ability can be broken through the burst of one's own Reiatsu. Of course, Reiatsu is weaker than Shimo, so you don't need to use this idea. The stagnant space is like trapping the opponent in amber, leaving only the ability to think. The space stagnation was released, and the timer retracted the hoof into the knife pin again. Obviously, he is still extremely satisfied with this ability. Bang, bang, at this moment, a knock on the door sounded. Shimo shouted without looking back, advertisement. Come in, Rukia. As early as when Rukia knocked on the door, he had already sensed the fluctuation of its Reiatsu. When the door was opened, an onion head was quietly poking out, looking around at the door. It looks like you were the only one in the dormitory. Vecchia walked in quietly like a thief. Shimo looked at her with a weird look, a little unclear so. What are you doing? Are you going to do something shameful again? Hearing this, Rukia's eyes widened, her deep purple eyes flashed with shame. When have I done shameful things? Why do you use another word? Seeing her, she seems to want to come up and bite Shimo. Shimo sat down at the tea table, picked up the teapot and filled himself with tea. Last time, you completely changed my dormitory while I was not using pink wallpaper and rabbit shabby decorations. Last time, the dark dishes you prepared almost directly sent me to the 4th division. Last time, it's even more exaggerated, you. Before she could finish her words, Rukia just felt hot and called to stop. Stop, so far, these are accidents. I am here to thank you specifically. Rukia has her hands behind her back, a mysterious look. My sister can recover, thanks to your help, Shimo. In order to express my gratitude, I decided having said that, Rukia stopped suddenly and did not continue. This actually aroused Shimo's curiosity. He looked at Rukia with a puzzled look and asked. Advertisement, what exactly is it? Dang. Gen Kia suddenly stretched out Qian, who was hiding behind her back, with a bragging look on her face. The newest free child Chabi doll. It took me 3 days to buy it. Shimo looked intently, but saw Kia holding a pink rabbit doll in her hands, her face flushed, and she seemed very excited. In the face of Kia's intentions, Shimo didn't have any sarcasm, nor did he refuse. He stretched out his hand, pressed it on Rukia's little head, and whispered. Thank you, I like it very much. After all, he took the doll in Rukia's hands. But what happened next went far beyond Shimo's expectations. When she took the rabbit shabby, Rukia suddenly stood on her toes and stretched her petite body forward. Before Shimo could react, he felt a cool mark engraved on his cheeks. Remember to take good care of rabbit shabby. Rukia's face was hot, her face flushed to the base of her ears, and steam curled up above her head. Then, like a frightened bunny, she hurriedly fled Shimo's dormitory. Zai looked at the back of his picking away, and his mood became more joyful for a while. What are you smirking? As soon as Rukia left on his front foot, another person came to Shimo's dormitory alone. The iconic pink pattern Haori and the old Casa have already explained the identity of the visitor. Kyōraku Shunsui looked at his nephew questioningly. Have it? Shimo began to pretend to be silly, as if I didn't know anything. Kyōraku Shunsui suddenly took Shimo's shoulders and asked with a smirk. The girl who just ran out of your dormitory should be the new sister of Captain Kuchiki, right? Chapter 31 Yamada Kianosuke, seeking flowers for evaluation votes. Advertisement. Which step is it? Uncle, let me tell you that all the important tasks of revitalizing the Kyōraku family are on your shoulders. Kyōraku Shunsui became very 8 trigrams. Shichi swept the unscrupulous elder a glance, disdain.
If the Kyōraku family counts on you, sooner or later it will be gone.
Kyōraku Shunsui was suffocated by this sentence and his face flushed. Talk about business. I'm here this time, it's about your joining the squad. In order to cover up his emotional failure, Kyōraku Shunsui hurriedly changed the subject. It was not a difficult thing to join the 4th division. But there was a small mistake in the middle. When it comes to this matter, Kyōraku Shunsui has an increasingly old face. As the head of the Kyōraku family and the captain of the 8th division at the same time, why do you have no dignity in front of your nephew? A long time ago, Shimo had proposed to go to the 4th division. I thought it was not a problem, but when it was the day of implementation, there were mistakes. Or, it's not bad for you to come to the 8th division.
Kyōraku Shunsui tentatively said, the 3 seats are reserved for you.
If Nanao doesn't mind, you can be a deputy captain. Shimo placed Chabby the rabbit in the parcel and was about to leave the Spiritual Arts Academy. These are all to be taken away. Then I will take your job. You don't care about the affairs of the Kyōraku family. Have you even let go of the affairs of the 8th division? Kyōraku Shunsui leaned on the door and said helplessly. Advertisement, Yafu, you can see through, but entering the 4th division is indeed a little troublesome. Shimo continued to pack up the things he was taking away, and asked without looking up. What's the trouble? Kyōraku Shunsui sighed and said. Yamada Katanosuke, the deputy captain of the 4th division, suspects that you, a superior nobleman, are also an excellent student who graduated early from the Spiritual Arts Academy. Talking about the impure motives of joining the logistics team, I propose to test your Kido level. When he said this, Shimo suddenly raised his head and recalled some related things.
At this time, Katetsu Aizen is not the deputy captain of the 4th division, he should be a seat officer or a member.
The current deputy captain of the 4th division, in Shimo's impression, is a gloomy and even insidious character. The only advantage is that he is loyal to the captain of the 4th division. But Shimo is very clear that he and this Yamada Kianosuke have not had any conflicts. Why would he suddenly target himself at this time? Perhaps, worried about you taking his place? Shimo turned his head, but saw the light of wisdom hidden under Kyōraku Shunsui's lazy look. Replace and make things difficult, one Shimo muttered to himself, and immediately smiled and said. The other party doesn't seem to be aware of his own mistakes. A sharp sword intent flashed under his peaceful eyes. Shimo was never a kind person. Otherwise, you won't be able to comprehend the alternative sword intent from Promise Sword. It looks like you have made a decision. Kyōraku Shunsui looked at Shimo, calm but with a hint of appreciation. Obviously, he was still very satisfied with his nephew. Advertisement no matter in terms of personality or talent, there is absolutely no problem. Yes. Shimo tightened the heavy package and placed it on the tatami. Since the other party has initiated a challenge to me, how can I choose to refuse? In the Kyōraku's man's dictionary, there is no escape from these 2 words. Upon hearing this, Kyōraku Shunsui stretched out and stood up. It's the best, so I won't bother you much. Yang Shinji has been urging manuscripts many times. After all, he left Spiritual Arts Academy directly. Subheading. Shinigami of the 4th division came to the Spiritual Arts Academy under the leadership of Yamada Katanosuke. Shimo also officially met with the deputy captain of the 4th division for the first time. On the narrow face, 2 slender eyes showed a little cold color. Yamada Kianosuke engraved the word insidious on his face deeply. Are you the Kyōraku Shimo who wants to join the 4th division? Yamada Kianosuke looked at Shimo with a hint of scrutiny. In view of the large number of players in the 4th division, it is up to me to review every shinigami who is going to join the 4th division. Cut out the unqualified. The last sentence is squeezed out from between the teeth. The inexplicable hostility made Shimo more upset with the deputy captain in front of him. How is the test method? Yamada Kianosuke showed a successful conspiracy smile, white teeth, giving people a shuddering feeling. Very simple, measured by Kido.